that I have everything that I need here. So let me get this. Okay, let me do that. Okay, okay. How's Dasha enjoying school?
It's good. It's good. They was scared about the little storm, but it wasn't that funny. The media always blows stuff up. So
Well, I think where she is, these kids they're accustomed to it
right,
because there are a few towns that were actually flooded out like 20 inches.
in Houston, where she is, it wasn't.
Yeah, yeah. Thank God,
Hmm.
thank God. But in other places, they really did. They've had a horrible time of it. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Can you turn this up, Paul? Thank you.
I-57 inbound traffic is barely moving from Cicero to
Okay.
159th Street, where all traffic is diverted off the expressway for shooting
Paul, what
investigation.
am I out is it 05 or is it 06?
0545.
Okay, thank you.
Consider the Bishop Ford
That's when I come in.
That's when you come in, yes.
Okay.
outbound Kennedy
And what is the hard out?
Harlem due to a collision.
2830.
Okay, and then you're out at 44 or 45.
No, 28 minutes, 30 seconds.
Okay, that's the hard out.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Can you hear me well, Darius?
I can.
Okay. And Paul, if you can get Dr. Verholden up by 15, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
And if the economy goes in the tank, the party in power always loses the next election.
The Tom Hartman Radio Program, weekdays 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on WCPT 820, where facts matter.
This is Joan Esposito, and here at WCPT, we love pets. So much that we're spotlighting
1 minute.
Okay, thank you.
Dog or cat every month. So many deserving pets are waiting for their forever home. We've partnered with community shelters and our sponsors, Love for Dogs Pet Grooming and Mark Drugs, to talk about why rescue is best. It's all on Joan Esposito Live, local and progressive. See our current adoptable at WCPT820.com.
Right now, our country feels divided, but there's a place where people are coming together.
I was nervous to talk to someone so different.
30.
Love Has No Labels and One Small Step are helping people with different political views, beliefs, and experiences.
Where she is.
And it feels good.
Okay.
It gives me a lot of hope.
Linda, Dave, Jarvis, Raphael. Hey, sweetie. Sending love to our Jewish brothers and sisters. This is the holiest day of their calendar year, Yom Kippur. God bless them.
WCPT 820, where facts matter.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
And hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Thursday, September 16th, 2021. Happy Yom Kippur to our brothers and sisters of the Jewish faith. This is the holiest day of the year for our Jewish brothers and sisters. Our Jewish, they are closest to God, and when they, for nearly 26 hours, afflict their souls and abstain from food and drink and do not wash or apply lotions or creams, they complete themselves totally to God, spending the day in synagogue and in prayer for forgiveness. God bless the members of our Jewish community, and may we all learn from that. Amen to that. I am Santita Jackson. This is WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want to hear your voices today. 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. T, I want to know what you think about the hearings yesterday with mere female gymnasts. They were not women at the time, girls. The FBI failed them. They even lied on them in their reports, and they gave cover to a pedophile. Well, a pederast, actually. A pedophile attacks children under 12, but oof. What do you think about that? What do you make of that? What do you make of that? And then, um, but of course, uh, we need to talk about that today. And of course, we'll be talking about this budget with Dr. Max Wolf in the next hour, just at 7:30. What is the holdup on this $3.5 trillion deal, and where are we in this? I think we need to really look at that. We really need to understand what's happening with our money. Jackson will be with you today. I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. I want you to meet Raphael down there in Brazil and Dave Dowling up in Canada and Linda and was it Gary Craig? How you doing, sweetie? And Jewel and Keith up in New York. Keith Fluid, my singing buddy. Lewis, Chewy Russell, Vicky Wells, Daphne McDonald. Oh, so many of you. Linda Smith Hall, sending you all much love today. And it's great to be with you. It's great to be with you. Ought to have a really, hey, Paula, what's going on, girl? Shirley from Philadelphia. I knew it was Samantha, what's going on? Meet us over on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. We're also streaming on WCPT's Facebook page. I want you to stay tuned to WCPT throughout the day and AM 950 Radio. The best progressive talk in the country is where you can find, was where you will be able to find that right here on these stations. And of course, if you want to hear the podcast of this show without commercials, go to WCPT820.com/Santita, WCPT820.com/Santita. Before we get into this conversation about what happened at Michigan State University with our elite female gymnasts, we're going to hear from Pastor Darius Brooks. He's going to give us some good news, but I want to get a few headlines in before we get into the rest of the show. Chicago will have a high of 79 degrees today, and it will be sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul will have a high of 85 degrees. It will be cloudy. The Dow closed up yesterday 236 points. The Nasdaq closed up 123 points. The S&P 500 closed up 37 points. In Major League Baseball, the Twins were triumphant. Well, no, were they? No, actually, it is they've lost to Cleveland. Cleveland 12, the Twins 3. And the Cubs, well, they fell to the Phillies. It's Phillies 6, the Cubs 5. And, well, just all the way around, we had a tough day in baseball. The Angels 3 and the White Sox 2, everybody. As we celebrate Yom Kippur with our brothers and sisters of the Jewish faith today, let's look at what else is happening in the news. Well, the coronavirus, of course, is front and center in the news. 3 reports published yesterday support the argument that booster doses of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine would be safe and effective and may be needed. Interestingly enough, that's contradicted by the 2 FDA officials who resigned last week. They were part of a letter that was published in The Lancet, which is one of the most respected medical journals in the world, based in England. And they feel that COVID booster shots are not necessary. We'll have to ask Dr. Deb about that. This CNN report goes on to say that these and other reports will be on the docket tomorrow when the FDA vaccine advisors meet to discuss booster doses. I hope someone will interview these 2 FDA officials who resigned. I think that's a big deal. The Justice Department has announced that federal law enforcement officials will be banned from using neck restraints, commonly known as chokeholds, during arrests and using no-knock entries when executing warrants except in rare cases. As the federal government looks to increase policing accountability, some states are facing issues within their own justice systems. In Colorado, a 14-month investigation into the Aurora Police Department found a pattern of practicing racially biased policing and excessive force in Georgia. The U.S. Justice Department announced a statewide investigation into the state's prisons, focusing on prisoner violence and sexual abuse of gay, lesbian, and transgender prisoners by prisoners and staff. We'll be talking about Larry Nassar very shortly. What happened at Michigan State? What happened at Michigan State? Now, COVID-19 vaccine makers are being blasted for an unconscionable amount of profits that they have been making, and monopolies and low taxes. The People's Vaccine Alliance on Wednesday called out BioNTech, Moderna, and Pfizer for reaping astronomical and unconscionable profits, as they said, due to their monopolies of mRNA COVID vaccines developed with the help of public funding and, of course, backed by two of the biggest spokespersons you could have, the president and the vice president of the United States. Big Pharma's big business model, they say, received billions in public investments, charge exorbitant prices for life-saving medicines, and they pay little tax. Wow. What do you think, everybody? Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna have sold over 90% of their vaccines to wealthy countries while charging up to 24 times the potential cost of production. We got to talk about that, everybody. What do you think about that? You pay for it and then you pay for it again and again and again. And they're saying, call them now. There are 3 Democrats who are endangering the plan to lower drug prices. That's right. Who are they? Representatives Kathleen Rice, Democrat of New York, Kurt Schrader, Democrat of Oregon, and Scott Peters, Democrat of California. They're standing in the way, according to Social Security Works and Public Citizen and other organizations, of the government negotiating to lower our drug prices. What do you think about that? They want Big Pharma to call the shots. What do you think about that? Now, Chinese state-run newspapers are claiming that warships could soon be near Hawaii. This comes amidst the news that the United States, Australia, and UK have unveiled new security partnership as China expands its military and influence. And it's controversial, but it's happening anyway. There's a Kenyan Anglican province that has defied a moratorium, and they have ordained a woman bishop. That's right. Reverend Rose Okeno is now a bishop in the Anglican Church of Kenya. Congratulations to her. Pastor Darius Brooks, we need some good news today. How are you?
I am blessed and happy to be on your show, Santita. I love me from you, and I love your show. Keep going, girl.
Thank you, sweetie.
It's so true. Often we do some things, and we don't get the rewards right away. But Santita, they come in ways we can never think or imagine. We bless people we will never see or meet. So keep going. Keep going. It's an incredible place and space that people can come and get some information and facts, the way you say it. I love it.
Thank you.
Santita, this morning, God gave me Habakkuk 2:2. Then the Lord replied, write down the vision or revelation and make it plain on the tablets so that a herald, which is a messenger, may run with it, or he that see it may run with it. Santita, in other words, what I want, what you want, and those that are on your shoulders listening to you, the things we have aspirations about, there is a position that when it comes to God's plan spiritually, and our plan in the natural brings things together. He says, I'm to write it down how I get my answer plainly on the tablet, so that as I run, I can carry a clear message first to me of what I want, and then make it plainly clear to others. Santita, if I had to use for a thought today, God just dropped this in our spirit. One serves at the pleasure of the visionary. Santita, whenever we're serving, we serve at the pleasure of the visionary. In other words, whoever's the visionary, whoever's making this thing happen, they get pleasure in making sure that it comes to pass. Santita, one cannot get what they want remaining where they are. One of the hardest things in this walk is that it's gone unnoticed, the opportunity that God has put before us for salvation, to really save us or to help us become healed. Everything we do, everything we say, everything we do or don't say has tangible effect in and on our lives. God's word, by the way, is the first vision. He tells us that he has a plan for us. We should see his plan in our lives. And his plan is not to hurt us. It's designed to move us beyond our extreme. to bring about promises of his results. And not even to compete or compare Santita with others, but to simply see God's plan for our individual lives. When we write things down and start with his plan and connect his plan to our plan, there's a pleasure that comes with the end result. You must see it and write it down and do what is written down. And Santita, as I close, if it ain't written down, it ain't going to happen. There are two visions. First, natural, then spiritual. One should be yours, which is in the natural, and the other one is God's, which is his spiritual perspective. Because one serves at the vision, pleasure of the visionary. So if you really have a vision and you really write it down like your show, there's a pleasure that comes with you putting this thing together, that when you write it down, it's to turn out just like you say you want it to happen. Often we go towards things and we don't write them down to think them through. But God has a promise that if you love what you see, trust me in what you say, he says you will serve at the pleasure of what you see. You'll serve and bring that thing together. That thing has blessed my life. I'm doing it now on this show with you, with Dasha, Church, Grace Central. I'm writing things down, and it keeps you from distractions, and it focuses you on your vision.
Absolutely.
Is that you become the server of your visionary.
And it gives you something concrete, everybody. It's so important. I mean, it's just like getting your grades. They give you something to which you can aspire. You can do better here. You're doing well here. Keep on going. All of that. Please, you write down music so you don't lose it. How about that? So, even a record is written down. It's written down in your ear. So think about that, everybody. Yes.
Robin, the bank is written down. Did you hear what I said?
Everything is, well, if it's done or if it's going to be done. That's right.
He says, if you have a vision, don't get distracted by stuff. Write it down. Because when you write it down, you can also see the pros and cons.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah.
You worship before you go, Pastor Brooks?
We are open on Sunday from 10:30 till noon, and Tuesday from 7 till 8. We have people in life application classes Tuesday. So we are literally open. Of course, you wear your mask, but we are literally open now. So you are welcome to come to Grace Central, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois, gracecentral.net. You also send all your tithes and offerings and contributions there too.
Well, no, that's very important because you got to keep the church open. Because throughout the week, I can tell you it's a living, breathing church. Throughout the week, people are there. They're working and they're worshiping through work, and it's a wonderful thing to see. Wonderful thing. Sending you much love, Pastor Darius Brooks. I've got Dr. Deborah Holden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, and we are, before we get into this discussion about the U.S. female gymnasts who were sexually abused there, and the FBI's role in obscuring or covering up the abuse. There's just so much that came out in this hearing yesterday. It was absolutely stunning and very, very painful, but it took me back to a whole lot that's happened in sport with our young people when they do not have the protections that they need. One need only look at the University of Michigan or Penn State with Joe Paterno and Mr. Sandusky and on and on and on. But now the question is, we're talking about boosters. I mean, that is something we talked about the other day. And of course, we saw these FDA officials who resigned last week, Dr. Verholden, because they apparently felt that they were being pressured by the White House to approve these boosters. And now they've signed on to a letter in the Lancet, which is one of the world's foremost medical journals. And they are saying that they were recommending against the booster shot. And you helped us to really understand that you have the FDA, you have the World Health Organization, you have the White House, you have these different entities, but you helped us to understand what they are all supposed to do. How consequential is it that these two officials who resigned, and they were controversial resignations, how significant is it that they have signed on to a letter that's been published in the Lancet?
I think it's a major, major significance, and a lot of us are going bravo and thank you.
Really?
We wanted to see the kind of boldness, from people and from leaders and from employees and agencies when misinformation was being provided or when information was being withheld. We wanted to see people step up. A group of epidemiologists and 3 former CDC directors wrote a letter to Robert Redfield, who was the director of the CDC during the previous administration, calling for him to be bold, and if he was unwilling to be bold, that he should resign the post. Calling for him to be bold and to defy the president and the White House because the American people deserve the truth. And he was unwilling to do that. He was just unwilling to do that. If he had done that, do you know he would probably right now be on the board of every major kind of health entity out here? And these board positions pay some of their board members a 7-figure salary to serve on a board of directors. But he was just so worried about keeping his job in that moment or keeping his stature or his standing in that moment that he was okay with withholding information or not being bold and making sure that the American people had what they needed. That's the assignment that these folks take. So I don't feel any sympathy for somebody who takes the paycheck, raises their hand for the job, takes that oath, and then doesn't do it. It doesn't say I will lead the nation and be the stake in the ground for health when it's convenient and doesn't in any way make me uncomfortable or jeopardize my job. That's not what people raise their hand for. So the fact that, people within the FDA have said, this is not good, this is not right, and I won't be a party to it. I like that. That's the style of scientific integrity and boldness and bravery that we just haven't seen at all during this pandemic.
Well, what's interesting is now I want to hear more from them, like we want to hear from you.
Exactly.
Now I want to ask them, and no one has interviewed them yet, and perhaps someone is listening this morning, and you all will do this. No one. I had to, I read some of everything, Dr. Deb, and I came across, because I was reading some international papers, I came across the fact that these people have signed on to a letter. It's called Considerations in Boosting COVID-19 Vaccine Immune Responses. And it's in the Lancet, and you know better than anyone. What is the Lancet? It's one of the most,
It's one of the most prestigious medical journals. We have a system that we use called Impact Factor.
Okay.
And it's one of the highest impact factor journals, meaning it is both read and cited more and substantially more than other kind of peer-reviewed journals. Peer review means nothing goes in the Lancet without multiple scientific peers in that, whatever area the publication is in, reviewing and saying, okay, this is, has scientific integrity and is meritorious and should be published. So it's a very tough journal to get published in.
So what does it say to you that they have signed on to this letter saying that, and they recommend against the booster shot at this time? I mean, and I want to ask you about people who've had COVID. I mean, because my mother, has been recovering from COVID, as has been my father. Natural immunity. They're saying, no, you don't need to get the shot just yet because you still have a lot of antibodies. What do you say about this? Some people are calling it a bombshell letter. Would you go that far? I've got about a minute.
Yeah, I mean, this is what have I been saying this whole time? We don't listen to science.
Okay.
That's been my problem, this whole thing, that we've been letting, and I would give this is a stretch to say well-meaning people. That's an assumption, and I don't typically like assumptions that aren't, can't be, grounded in some type of fact or history or something like that. But let's just assume, okay, we'll just, for the sake of argument, that the people who've done these things are well-intentioned, right? They don't mean harm. You still wouldn't, shouldn't be just making things up as you go along. And there's been so much double talk. Even Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci, remember when I got my one shot and then they canceled my appointment for my second shot?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we just really, as long as everybody gets at least one, that's cool. I was livid. I said, that is such a lie. To me, it was a lie because there was nothing that was put out by the FDA who approved the Pfizer vaccine that I got that said that. There was nothing that said the course is a one-dose treatment and one shot.
30.
It wasn't. It was very specific. It was a 2-dose vaccine, and the shots were to be administered 21 days apart. That is what they tested on 100,000 people. That is what I
signed up for. That's right.
As it turns out, if I had only got one dose right now, that would be the equivalent of me, basically going out and wishing myself luck every day.
Well, hold on.
Of the 2-dose vaccine would provide very little protection in the face of these variants.
Talk more tomorrow on the Santita Jackson show. We're going to extend it. But you know what? We got to talk about what happened at Michigan State. We got to talk about what happened with our gymnast. Back in just a minute. Yes, Dr. Deb. Yeah, when I came across that, I said, "Ooh," and I came across it late. Otherwise, I would have sent it to you before. So please forgive me for that. Because I like to send you things, but I came across it and I said, I can't help this.
The FDA article?
Yeah.
I mean, the article yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because it bothered me. Because look, we all have skin in the game, but my parents, okay, I only get one set of those. I want to make sure that they're getting the right information. Okay, that's what's troubling to me. I'm worried about the information that they're getting. Because now, people just, even in the medical community, they're just passing this along. And if I really want to have a conspiracy theorist, I'm like, that's the Lancet, for heaven's sakes. The Lancet is a big deal. Oh, we've got your favorite guy, Attorney Robert Patillo. Oh, my gosh. Drop the mic, Robert. We got Dr. Deb here. She's at Michigan State. Of course you know that. You get for you. I am not mad because you know what? That's what this is for. We're supposed to be sharing, right?
Robert's show is very fun, and his listeners are very different than these listeners. I have to put on a different hat when I go over there. I'm the same person, but I just put on a different hat. I put on my dentist.
And we have Attorney Hoffman
when I go over to Robert's show.
Oh, you got to be ready to rock and roll with him.
Yeah.
Dr. D pulls out the old school Baltimore when he comes over, because my people, they're a little intense sometimes.
Oh, well, people are intense over here, but I think maybe they're a little quieter. I don't know. But I think it's fantastic. I love it. Love it. Love it. It's a little calmer. Everybody like and share, like and share, like and share. Oh, but Robert, I do need to speak with you. Okay.
Of course.
I do need to speak with you. So let me know when you have a little time. Just give me a call. Okay. And when you all hear my voice, I've got a heart out. So so just when you hear me, I'm trying. Sometimes I'm giving you an amen. Other times I'm like, I'm looking at this clock. But it would be helpful. I mean, I told you I was going to send you this link, everybody. I'm going to send it right now. Because it'll help you to see what I'm seeing. It'll help. This time.
1 minute.
.gov. Okay, stand by. But these these hearings yesterday were a lot. Oof. I'm going to send you all the clock that I'm using. I'm going to send you a link to it. Hey, CK.
Good morning.
How you feeling?
Feeling okay. Much better. Thank you.
Okay, of course. I got one of these things. Okay.
Select 10.
Mm-hmm.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, 773-763-WCPT. That is my telephone number, 773-763-9278. If you want to text me, GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to do that. But I want to hear your voices today. Did you see these hearings? Did you see these hearings? Did you hear what these gymnasts, these young ladies who were girls when this happened, the sexual abuse by a trusted member of the team, of the doctor who took care of them. He was abusing them, fondling them, sexually assaulting them. What do you think about that? And then when the FBI stepped in, they not only did nothing about it, the agent in charge uh, did not tell the truth. What did Michaela Maroney said? She said the FBI made entirely false claims about what I said. Entirely false claims while they were trying to get them to accept his plea deal. Wow. What is going on here? I just see something else going on, and I want to hear from you. I'm on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT 820 here in Chicago, but all around the country and all around the world, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want to know what you think about this, because I have to tell you, um, I was angered by this. It took me back to Joe Paterno and Jerry Sandusky at Penn State. I thought about what happened under Bo Schembechler. I mean, Joe Paterno and Bo Schembechler, icons in the world, not just of college sport, but in sport. And I'm wondering about these elite athletes who are entrusted to these persons, and these horrific things happen to our children, and then nothing happens. And this, we find out, uh, Dr. Deborah Verholden, the FBI was involved. The FBI, they were involved, and they did nothing. They not only did nothing, they tried to get this young lady to accept the plea deal for this pederast. Yeah, because they were over 12. That's what happens. There's a difference between pedophilia and pederasty. When you're under 12, the abuser is a pedophile. A pederast is someone who attacks someone who's over 12. Either way, it's a horrific thing because these are all children. The Department of Justice, Ms. Maroney said, refused to prosecute these individuals. Why? It is the Department of Justice's job to hold them accountable. I am tired of waiting for people to do the right thing because my abuse was enough, and we deserve justice. What do you think? What do you think? I mean, Dr. Deb, hey, what happened up there?
I mean, you got to get Larry Nassar did what he did for 20 years. This spanned the course of 2 decades of women abused and violated, some of them with their parents in the room. I mean, the level of hubris, to do something like that to a young girl with her parent in the room, with people watching. There were sometimes parents who watched these exams happen, and he would get an erection and things like that.
Oh, gosh. What?
I think the FBI is the FBI was despicable in their response. I mean, it's just, the amount of courage it takes. You got to get what happened in that case. A whole lot of so-called good people did nothing. A whole lot of good people did nothing. Because these girls, many of them complained, and what did they do? They lost their standing. They lost their shot. How do you even go back and correct that for somebody?
See, wait a minute.
To be a world-class gymnast is very short.
But that's what bothers me. That is this the price of admission? Because they went to all of the authorities and they were told to be quiet. They knew who this guy was. They knew what he was doing. My brothers played sport in high school and in college. And one of my brothers played Division I football at UVA. And my parents were all over it. I mean, even though Jesse and Yusuf were in school in Washington, D.C., there was either I was at the game when I got to school at Howard, or certainly my mother and father. They showed up at almost every game. It of the coaching staff at the schools and at UVA too. And my mother said, I didn't serve up my children. I'm not serving them up. I just need you to teach them. I'm glad you've given them the opportunity to do this. But, in college, it was a different deal because they were playing football on scholarship, and that's a different thing, but not in high school. And I'm just wondering when I look at Jerry Sandusky, who went to these poor communities, Dr. Deb, and lured these children in, talking to these children, many of whom are fatherless, or certainly their fathers were not around for whatever reason. Sometimes not the dad's fault, but whatever it is, they got vulnerable people and they brought them in, and then they meet the boosters. The boosters sexually abuse them, and no one says a thing. Bo Schembechler, no one says this thing. His own son was told not to say anything. What is that, Deborah?
Well, we have real incentives in this country for doing the wrong thing and disincentive for doing the right thing. I do think this reeks also of privilege. This reeks of privilege. Only a card-carrying physician, white male, let's not get that mistaken, did this. And most of the people who buffered him were also wealthy white male physicians. The dean at the college where he worked, who also lost his job, but was not tried criminally, but lost his job. Most of the other people in that enterprise, you got to get, this isn't happening and people don't know about it. This isn't something that went on and there weren't talks about it. This isn't something that happened and no women came forward. No, like I said, a lot of good people did nothing. A lot of so-called good people did nothing. And it just reeks of privilege. And let's not also forget who the victims were. They were young women. I talk a lot about how and this is the work of Gail Christopher, with this truth and racial healing and transformation work, we have a hierarchy on the value of human life in America. And the life of women and young people, and especially young women, is lower on the totem pole than that of wealthy white men. And we are now seeing that no one is immune. These isms, there's a real cost and a real price for tolerating them. And that's what we're seeing. I would venture to guess, if you look at the FBI agents who were conducting the doing the work, most of them are likely also older, wealthy white men. I mean, so there's a bit of a conspiracy going on to protect one another and try to get problems to go away instead of holding people to account and providing justice.
Everybody, what do you think about this? Because think about our children who get recruited into these elite programs. Think, how do we protect them? How do we protect them? Because they, with all due respect, Dr. Deborah Verholden, they weren't even young women at the time. These were kids. These were girls. You can't be a 25-year-old gymnast. That's so rare. Please. You do this as a little girl. That's what you do. This is a terrible, terrible thing. Robert Patillo, and then, I can't wait to hear what a C.K. Hoffler has to say. But Attorney Robert Patillo, of course, on WAOK every Sunday. He's been hanging in there during the week. Hope they don't take him from us, but we love you, Robert Patillo. WAOK, the iconic Atlanta radio station. From 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time, Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push. Your thoughts about this?
Well, I think the testimony was absolutely chilling. And the one thing that I could not help but think of was over the summer, all the criticism that Simone Biles was getting from conservatives, saying she wasn't mentally tough enough, she didn't love the country, she wasn't willing to sacrifice, she was having a little breakdown in Tokyo. And I just want to go and hit those people in the face, quite frankly, because understanding what some of these young women went through just for the chance to represent America, sacrificing their youth, sacrificing their innocence, being pushed along by parents, by doctors, all almost at the price of admission in order to participate in these competitions. And these are things that we know about, that have become famous, that have gotten in public faces. I think one of the accusations that this Dr. Nasser has over 250 possible assaults under his belt, even though he was convicted of 10. And we have to look at our sports culture and the drive that some people have in order to have their children succeed in sports. You know, sometimes it's okay, just let your kid draw in the corner. They don't have to do all these things. We have to reevaluate the way we look at these things as a society and what the role of the adults are in enabling this. You talked about Sandusky. We talked about Joe Paterno at Penn State. We talked about Bo Schembechler, who was really a demigod in Michigan sports. We have to start understanding that sports is not the end-all and be-all of society. It's not the make and measure of an individual. It's not worth all that we sacrifice, all that we pay in order to, at the end of the day, be entertained. Sports is a television show. Once you get down to the nitty-gritty, that's the way their economic models work. It's simply getting advertisers to watch young athletes perform, some of which are compensated for it. And we all hold a role in this because we all were are to some ways not participants in it, but condoning of it. We saw Carrie Shrugs in the Olympics being literally a victim of child abuse during the Olympics and called her a hero for doing so. If you take a small child and make them do a backflip on a broken ankle in front of millions of people, that's child abuse, and we call that a heroic for some reason. So we need to reevaluate the value we put into some of these sports and understand that we can no longer afford to simply sacrifice and break these children and then literally throw them to the wayside, often before they're 20 years old. I've represented many athletes in their post-playing careers, and many end up in just very hard and destitute situations, one because of their previous injuries and ending up with addiction issues to deal with the pain from previous injuries. Also, particularly for former NFL players I've represented, the idea of your best years of your life, your best contribution to society, being over before you're 30, psychologically, that's a lot for people. To think that the most that you're ever going to commit to society, that you are retired by the age of 30, and very much society throws you away thereafter. So we need to look into what we can do individually to ensure that we are restoring the humanity to athletes and not simply seeing them as a commodity.
Attorney C.K. Hoffler, what did you make of what uh, of their testimonies, and who is culpable? Can anyone be sued? U.S. Gymnastics, the Olympic Committee, Michigan State. I mean, we now see Dr. Nasser's able to. He wanted to keep more of his money in prison. I mean, it's like, whoa, what is this? What did you make of this? Because you are a football mom now.
Well, good morning, Santita, and this extraordinary panel, and to your listeners. Religion in this country is something that, people, the Constitution speaks to the separation of church and state. And I've come to learn through firsthand experience and my thought about these chilling testimonies yesterday, and just the fact that we had to have this process confirmed to me that sports in this country, especially, football, basketball, gymnastics, and others, they are like religion. They are like religion. people view them, fight for them, shield them, hide them, commit despicable acts in the same way that we have done historically in the world because of religion. So it's like religion. It's the only thing that I've ever seen that unites people that under other circumstances would kill each other, would despise each other. I would dare say that those who attempted to take over the Capitol in the failed coup d'etat on January 6th would be united with people who they would feel are the most progressive radicals in this country in a football game. They would be sitting there side by side, cheering side by side with no masks on during COVID, because football would unite them like a religion. So that's the context, that's the fabric, that's the basic fabric that I paint this picture. Who's culpable? Well, I think Simone Biles said it best, quite frankly. She said it best when she said that there are the different entities that she blames. There are organizations and entities that were created, indeed, by Congress. Created by Congress, the highest and most significant legislative branch, the legislative branch in this country, but the highest legislative branch, to oversee and to protect her and them as athletes. The U.S. Gymnastics and the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, they were created to protect the athletes, and they failed to do their jobs. The FBI, the top investigative branch of this country, federal, failed to do its job in this case.
But wait. But hold on.
Failed to do their job.
They not only did that, but I need you to speak to this. They actively, they lied about what this young woman, she was a girl at the time. He lied in his report, and he was never even, after an internal, the inspector general, the report, he was never even punished at the time. How can an FBI agent lie in the report? They're trying to convince her to accept this man's plea deal. They lied, and they were protecting him.
Despicable, right? And it was despicable, unacceptable.
Wow.
But I started off by saying that in this country, and we're not the only country that uses to say, but I'm focused on this country because this is where it's happening. These sports are a religion. And just think of what people will do in the world to support their religious belief. They will stop at nothing to promulgate or protect religious beliefs. Wars have been started. Wars will continue. Wars are continuing today over religious beliefs. And that is what these sports are. So the failures of the various committees that were created to protect the athletes, the failure of those entities, those legal entities that were designed to investigate and get to the truth, the failure of a system in cases where there were universities involved, where universities looked the other way, where universities failed to investigate, which often happens, fail to investigate. And in some instances, I do blame the parents who may have been there. And when grown people know what it is, when a grown man in front of their very eyes has an erection.
Wait a minute, because they wanted to keep their child on the team. Stay right there, because I want to bring Jim in. Stay right there, because they want to keep their child on. See, because this is a systemic problem, everybody. I think we have to look at it. And while our children are being recruited to play on these elite teams, these are some of the things that you need to watch out for. You really do. Jim, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Santita. This whole story is insane. First of all, my family, if somebody molested my sister or my brother or my dog, whatever it would be, some sexual deviant, I would be in his office every day, whoever the person was. I don't care if it was the King of England or the Queen of France. I would be there every day with any, and the Manly Art of Self-Defense would be employed. I don't understand why they had to, all the parents, 200 girls, where were the parents? Why weren't they out there with placards and everything else? This is ridiculous. This story is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, let me ask you this, Jim.
But there's been sexual deviance since we've been on this earth.
But Jim, hold on. Jim, stay right there. Stay there, because I want to engage you for a hot second. Do you think that it was the lure of keeping their children in this elite class of athletes so they would have a shot at the Olympics? Do you think that was part of it?
No, there is no excuse for that.
No, I didn't say excuse. I didn't say excuse.
No, my dear, listen.
Okay.
I don't care what the prize was. I don't care what the prize was. There is no prize over your sexual being, over your soul. There is no prize on your soul. No one can. The story stinks. The whole story stinks. Why do they have to go to the FBI? What happened to the regular municipality police in that town in Ohio? I don't care about who cares if you make the Olympics. I don't want to be molested by anybody. They can have the Olympics.
But you know what? I wasn't implying that, Jim. I'm just wondering how this was allowed. I'm wondering how somebody's father did not clock this guy.
Parents, why weren't their parents at the guy's office?
I know it's violence, but I can't even imagine.
Dude, that's not violence. That's just protecting your.
No. I'm saying I don't know how somebody's parent, somebody's father or mama, did not go upside this guy's head.
That whole story is
just
nuts.
It's
nuts.
Never.
Let's put it this way: when I was 14 years old, I had somebody. When I was a kid in high school, there was some fruitcake that was after. We took care of the guy. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I just asked about that. Yeah.
I don't care about the Olympics or anything else. Anyway, the story is nuts. Anyway, have a good morning. Thank you.
Dr. Deb?
That outrage makes sense. It does. If you've seen any of the documentaries around it, if you heard or listened to any of the women who spoke at his sentencing hearing, if you've read any of the articles on the mishandling and the report that was produced about how the FBI mishandled this, it's infuriating. You know why? Because we can all identify with a daughter or a niece or a, best friend or a neighbor or, we just, when you think about protecting the most vulnerable among us, girls who are, and what most people don't realize is the training that these girls go through. Many of them have leave home at as early as 7, 8, 9.
Put a pin in that.
And train.
You also have to get children. Okay, I just know this through music. When you get to a certain level in your music development, and if you have a certain, you cannot even get close to some coaches. Okay, you have to be chosen by the coaches and the teachers. In fact, you have to audition for them. Okay, because that's how that works. So whenever you start scaling the heights in any profession, you know this, you come out of Johns Hopkins. There's no more elite institution in the world, particularly for what you do. You have to be chosen. Not only do you have to have the grades and the test scores, you have to have the personality. If you do not fit into that setup, they don't let you in. Or they'll give you all kinds of hell when you do get in. Robert Patillo, what do you make of this? Because I've got a minute and a half before I go to break. What about the parents?
I think everyone's making prescient points, but I don't think that we can let these parents off the hook because, one, you have to have a level of communication with your children where they are ready, willing, and able to come to you comfortably and tell you what is happening. Dear God, what does it say where these children often didn't feel that they could even communicate with their parents because their parents were so intense into these sports, into them becoming, as you said, Olympians, becoming successful, making it to the top level, that they thought that they would let down their parents by letting them know that they were being abused, by seeing this doctor who's visibly aroused and clearly enjoying himself during medical exams on their child and not knocking them upside the head. I mean, there's a level of the level of blame to go around to everybody is intense. But as a parent, your number one and pretty much only reason for existence on this planet is ensuring that your children are safe and cared for and are able to grow up in an environment of comfort and love. And I think we have to, one, make sure that we atone to these young women, but two, go back to these adult women now who are in their, 30s and 40s, and see what we can do to help them, because these, as we saw from the Me Too movement, when much of the harassment and assaults that women went through came to life, this stuff has long-term, lasting effects throughout life, and that we bear culpability to this and reforming the way that we do athletics in this country, so that, as DK says, we from a religion back down to a hobby.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, with everything that we do in this society, you being able to run and jump is a hobby. It should not be the end-all and be-all of your life.
Well, in CK's at all these games. We're going to talk about that on the other side. And I thank God for my mama today and my daddy. My mother, though, front line on this thing. And she wouldn't let us in anything. She was all over it. She let them know, I am here. Don't play with me. Santita Jackson Show, more in just a few minutes. Oh, my goodness. I'm not trying to, I don't think anyone on this panel, we're not trying to blame parents, but we are trying to get people to accept responsibility. And it's not just Nassar and Michigan State and the U.S. Gymnastics Committee and the FBI, it's all of them. But somebody's father, somebody's mama should have gone upside this man's head. I'm a nonviolent person.
One of the dads committed suicide. One of the dads.
Yeah.
The daughter came to him and said, "This is what's happening." It had happened even, I believe, with this particular young woman in their home. Because we're talking about the women were on his team, but remember, he was just moving around, slithering around Lansing and East Lansing community, because you want to talk about knowing somebody. So know him, to get close to him, to get him to agree to train or treat, not to train, but to treat your young athlete, your 8-9-year-old. He can't do that in the facility. He's coming to your house and treating them right under your roof.
Girl, please. He wouldn't have got out from under my roof. I tell you that.
You got Larry Nassar. You got your kid with the top doc for the Olympic training program. So this girl said, he's doing these things, and blah blah blah. They confronted him. He said, "Oh, she's just probably uncomfortable with the treatment." The father came back and was like, "Chill out. You're gonna ruin your big shot."
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Don't make those kind of accusations. So when all of this stuff ultimately then came out, the dad couldn't live with himself.
Of course. Yeah, and you know what? And I think that's a horrible thing, but that's what it comes down to. Your big shot. Don't say, I'm like, are you kidding me? But the thing is, most of these kids needed that, or at least they wanted that big shot. It was their opportunity to be on the come up. And these kids are being exploited. And that's a horrible thing. And they're being a pedophile and pedophiles so that we can have these children abused. That's what's happening. Not just pedophiles and young men, young women. Okay? They get on these teams. Some vulgar people. And we need to talk about this, CK and Deborah and Robert. This is shameful. Think about all these poor kids who brought into these big, these big stadia. This might be the first time they get 3 meals a day, all that. Because I'm looking at football, I'm looking at everything, because it happened in football, it happens all over the place. Oh, Robert, what were you about to say? Sorry.
Well, what I was going to say is part of the culture that we have in sports in this country. When we say, well, look at him. Think about Joe Theismann or somebody. They want you to run out there on a broken leg and run through a brick wall in order to, help your high school team to a state championship. But nobody's paying those medical bills for the next 50 years of your life for what you did to help that high school state championship. It's the fact that we allow students to completely forego academics. Like the minute we figure out you can run fast and jump high, we don't make you read another book for the next 15 years because we got to help the team. We have to reevaluate the value we put into these things because we put it above life, we put it above liberty, we put it above education, we put it above freedom, and that's the culture that drives allowing a monster like this to continue to survive, and it drives these, some of these sports parents are just as bad as the dance moms who put their children into all these events and activities and allow them to be, psychologically abused and destroyed simply for these reasons. So I think we have to look at what the drive for success and wealth and fame in this country and what we allow it to do to generations of children.
Amen to that. And Effie Rolfe says, do you think it's similar to how parents allowed their kids to sing with R. Kelly trying to get a big break? No, these parents have delivered their children to Robert Kelly. And then he had a whole ecosystem of people around him who benefited. I know this about you, Robert. So he would give them, I'm sure, rights to a song, rights to music. Because Robert Kelly cannot read or write. We don't know if he's clearly a musical genius, but he can't read or write. And he was just taken advantage of. I'm not saying that what he did not do was horrific, but I think if you do not look at all the people around him and chase that money, find out who got rights to his music, find out who got paid. How are you going to take your 13 or 14-year-old child in need? My mother wouldn't even let me be in church choirs or in the choir in my high school. She said, there's too much mischief. She said, if you can sing today, you'll be able to sing tomorrow. But right now, she said, I can't, there's too much that happens. And I can't be everywhere at one time. But what we're going to do is guarantee that we're not going to have the mischief here. No, you may not be in that. I came from a fine church. But she just said, no, there's just too much stuff that goes on the bus. And when you all go away and, no. At some point, parents have to step up and say, stop. But then FBI, Robert, CK, and Dr. Deb, they need to be called out because they lied here. They lied. And they tried to cover us up. That's outrageous. But here they're chasing down black activists. They know everything that you do, even today. Now, I'm not talking about COINTELPRO. Are you serious? And you cover up a pedophile, a pederast? Come on, you guys. Oh, you were not sending your sons on sleepover invitations. My mother didn't do that either. You could stay at our place, maybe, but you could not. My parents didn't let us go out. No.
Let me tell you, I didn't let my kids were taller, bigger, stronger, everything than everybody else. They couldn't do sleepovers till they were like 14 and 15. I think they've done one or two.
30.
And they just felt so bad because other kids were doing it.
Absolutely.
5, 6, and all that kind of stuff. And
about 10 seconds.
Just, and so all I can say is, as parents, we have got to take greater responsibility.
Absolutely. And greater care. No, hold that thought, because I want us to talk about that on the other side, because that's very real.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. We're talking about what happened with our U.S. gymnast. We saw Simone Biles cry yesterday as she recounted the abuse that she suffered at the hands of Dr. Nasser. The FBI covered it up. They lied in the investigative documents. They tried to get one of the young ladies at least to accept the plea deal of this doctor who was abusing them, sexually assaulting them. Wow. Got to talk about this. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. If you want to text me at that number, GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to do that, but I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts. You're saying a whole lot on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. I love it. And on Twitter at Santita J. And on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show. Please like and subscribe over there, everybody. But we've got to take this apart. We've got Attorney C.K. Hoffler, immediate past president of the National Bar Association, chair of Rainbow Push, brilliant practicing attorney of more than 3 decades. We've got Dr. Deborah Furhold, an epidemiologist, associate dean of public health at Michigan State University, and we've got Attorney Robert Patillo, who is the Southeastern Regional Director of Rainbow Push. And very quickly, of course, CK has her own show on WAOK every Tuesday at 11 o'clock Central Eastern Standard Time. And Robert Patillo is 1 to 4 every Sunday on that same station on WAOK. I'm going to get a couple of these headlines out the way and get back to this conversation that we are having, a stirring conversation about what happened with these athletes, they were not young ladies at the time, they were girls. They were girls. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 79 degrees, sunny. And Minneapolis, St. Paul, 85 degrees, cloudy. The Dow closed up 236 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 123 points. The S&P 500 closed up 37 points. The Twins yesterday, well, they fell to Cleveland 12-3. The Cubs fell to the Phillies 6-5. And White Sox, well, the Angels bested them 3-2. We're sending all of our love and prayers to our Jewish brothers and sisters today. This is the holiest day of their year, Yom Kippur, everybody. When they are closest to God, they sacrifice for 26 hours, afflict our souls. They abstain from food and drink. They do not wash or apply lotions or creams. They do not wear leather footwear. They abstain from marital relations. Instead, they spend the day in synagogue, praying for forgiveness, really seeking to be close to God. We can all learn from that, sending all of our love to our Jewish brothers and sisters today. Just a few quick headlines. 3 reports published yesterday, support the argument that booster doses of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine would be safe and effective and may be needed. Now, that contradicts 2 of the FDA advisors who resigned last week. They are now part of a letter that was published in The Lancet, one of the most esteemed journals in the world. And they are saying that we do not need boosters. We're going to talk about that more extensively tomorrow, Dr. Deborah Verholden, because we need to know what we need to do, everybody. We need to know what we need to do. The Justice Department has announced that federal law enforcement officers will be banned from using neck restraints, also known as chokeholds, during arrest and using no-knock entries when in rare cases. And let's talk about Larry Nasser, acclaimed gymnast who were abused by a former physician. Well, Dr. Larry Nasser testified yesterday in a powerful Senate hearing. Simone Biles, Michaela Maroney, Maggie Nichols, Allie Reisman, they have given us so many thrills, so much joy. They all accuse the FBI of botching its investigation. A little bit more than that. That's what CNN said. They actually accused the FBI of lying. That's what they did. They said that they did not tell the truth. In fact, Michaela Maroney said the FBI made entirely false claims about what I said. Entirely false claims. That's not botched. And when the internal investigation was made by the Inspector General, that agent was not fired until much, much, much later, until this became a big scandal and a mess. And they tried to get her to, or at least one of the young ladies, to accept the plea deal of Dr. Nasser. How did that happen? Why? Where were the parents in this? Where was MSU? Dr. Nasser? U.S. Gymnastics? Why didn't anything happen? You know, I can't believe this man is still walking around feeling safe and telling you where he needs his money to go in jail. Unbelievable. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. We're going to be talking with Dr. Max Wolf at the bottom of the hour about the budget. Do you have skin in the game? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. We're talking with, the lone guy on this panel, Attorney Robert Patillo, Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push, host of his own show on WAOK 1 to 4 every Sunday. And we've got Attorney C.K. Hoffler, Past immediate president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest black bar association in the world, also chair of Rainbow Push. And she hosts her own show on WAOK every Tuesday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And Dr. Deborah Holden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, new grandma. That's what everybody calls you on, on this chat thread. What should we make of what we have seen? I mean, what do you make of this, Dr. Deb?
It's important that people understand the institutional protections that one would expect to be in place. They simply aren't there.
Okay.
They just simply aren't there. Like I said, and MSU has done a lot since then. They launched a whole campaign. If you see something, say something. They've got all these reporting systems and things in place. But, you know, a girl saying, when you got several dozen women who come forward, young women who are, you know, you got to get, these are not your typical young girls. These are girls who've been training as elite athletes most of their lives, at least the majority of their lives, right? It doesn't mean that they have all the sort of cognitive ability and rational thinking of older adults. But my point is, these are girls who have a lot of rigor, who are used to interacting a lot with adults. These are girls who are used to, you know, being in pain. These are girls who are used to, like, they got a lot of grit to them, you know? I remember sending my daughter off to summer camp. It was like a fitness camp for, you know, kids who were trying to work on their fitness. And she was 9, 10, and that was so hard to do. I remember her just being like, I just don't want you guys to go. These are girls, many of whom who've been away from home for the majority of their childhood, who've been around other adults, who've had to go through some tough spaces. So these are not the kind of people who sit around complaining and that don't have that tough spirit. When they come forward, and they told many coaches, staff, faculty, the few people that did come forward, many of them lost their jobs or were moved into other positions. You know, so the checks and balances and institutional structure that are supposed to be in place were there. They simply weren't working. They just weren't working. And a whole lot of so-called good people really did nothing. They turned a blind eye. They looked the other way. And this man was allowed to do this for 2 decades. So it was a real scarlet letter on the institution of Michigan State University. And I'll tell you my experience working there at the time, and I was relatively new to MSU when this broke. It felt like I had been sprayed by a skunk. Like, I had never been just so ashamed to take a paycheck from a place as I was when all of that stuff came out. The one thing that did happen was a very strong signal got sent in all of the leaders, because many of them claimed they didn't know. And my thing was, whether or not you knew, it was your job to know. So the fact that you didn't know is on you too. So the president got fired. As soon as we got a new president, the provost was replaced, the dean of all of the higher ups were held to account. But it was too little too late. Because I do believe, as Robert pointed to, that hurt and that trauma, that lives in people's soul. That gets embedded down in people. And a lot of these women, many of whom are now, remember, this has happened over 20 years. So many of these women are now in their 30s and early 40s. And there was a civil action, and they did receive a large settlement. But I think the healing that needs to occur from this for those women is going to be only, it'll be important that as a part of their healing, that we deal with the institutional breakdown, not just at MSU, but in many of these elite athletic programs where bad things are allowed to happen with impunity.
Well, you know, Richard Marks is saying on here, he says, a big reason that I liked the young Venus Williams was that she came off as a strong young female who was tight with her younger sister. Richard W. wasn't perfect, but you couldn't run game on his girls. You know why? Because he was there. He didn't let you play with his girls. And everybody has given Richard Williams the business because he would not allow you to mess with his children. It's interesting.
The only slippery slope with that is I don't want these girls to be seen as weak or anything.
No, they shouldn't be seen as weak.
like amazing, extraordinary human beings.
Yeah.
Because what was done to them, they were victimized. And honestly, I had some empathy. Some of these parents, I don't know. Again, I'm not so fast to rush to judgment because as a mother, it does sort of like I can't imagine being in the room with my daughter getting, having a broken ankle and a man inserting his fingers into her vagina and me not saying, "What the hell are you doing? What the hell is in her vagina that's connected to her ankle?" Like my brain is it's hard for me to wrap my head around.
You can't wrap your head around that.
Explicit in that, but at the same time, I don't want to blame people because you got to think you are just a average Midwest family who happens to have this little extraordinary star in your family, and you got that gift or that talent identified early, and then you trust what people are telling you. You got to get this man was a monster. For him to do that and to do that in front of their parents, he took great joy. It was a part of the sickness that he had, that he could do it with impunity with their parents in the room.
But you know what, Deborah?
I mean, he worked really hard to dupe a lot of people, and I don't want to make them out to be the problem or put them all in a category called they were just too busy trying to get their kids to the Olympics that they dropped the ball.
Well,
many parents also have been traumatized and have to live with, damn, this happened on my watch.
Well, and also, I
need them.
think you're right. But this is when you talk about privilege and equity. There's some people we see from Cam Newton being kicked off of his team that you don't have to be the most, that it is a little bit more than your talent and your gifts and being the best athlete. It's the politics of sport. It's the politics of any situation. And that's what is sickening to me, that part of the price of admission is all of this mess. Because some of these parents might have wanted to say something. I'm sure some of them did. But you get backed in a corner. If you don't keep your mouth shut, or if you keep your mouth shut, we can do. That's how it works. That's how it works. These girls couldn't even depend on the FBI to protect them.
Well, and you know what, Santita, about the parents, it probably was put to them that that the systems that were in place, I don't know this for a fact, will handle this, will take care of this, will make this right, will do all these things. And if you want your child, it's not good, it's not right, but if you want your child to succeed, you got to play by these rules.
That's
and let
right.
us handle this, doctor, whatever. I don't know that happens. I'm just saying, as parents, and I am a parent of athletes, so as parents, we've got to every day keep our eye on our children and never forget that they really are children. Because victims, if not redirected and if not counseled, just fall into a victim syndrome. I'm not a medical person. I rely on Dr. Deborah Verholder and others who are more equipped to do this. And sometimes victims remain victims and they prey on victims. So, and maybe I'm thinking about this, and this is not an excuse, because all of this is heinous, unacceptable, inexcusable, and someone has to be accountable. But I think, Santita, I share with you, I do Court TV. I do legal commentary fairly regularly for Court TV. And one of the cases that I cover right now that's hot is R. Kelly's trial, which is, you talk about something that makes you just feel like you want to consistently go home and take a shower. The evidence that is coming out and the stories that are told, much of which we knew, and it has been in the public domain for a very, very long time, is really just tragic. It's tragic. And we hear about things that may have happened to R. Kelly when he was a child. That does not excuse what he did, not by a long shot. It really doesn't excuse it. Because if the allegations against him are true, if they're true, and I always say when people are in trial, everybody has a right to be proven guilty. If they're true, then it's so heinous, it's so awful, it's so inexcusable.
He's a sick guy.
He's sick, but he should pay the price. She needs to be held accountable.
Yeah, but you know what? Could I put a pin in that? I think all the people who got rights to his music and who got paid, they need to turn that back over. Something else needs to happen. Because it's a nasty, nasty mess.
there's a whole dynasty of people who are part of this,
Yeah.
who facilitated, who encouraged, and who allowed this to happen. And in some instances, but not all, but in some, parents, in some instances. But in other instances, just the way the system worked and all the people who were involved in it, every step of the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I say that it's complex, but we've got to, as parents, keep our eye on the prize. And I say that even including myself with our children who are involved in athletics, make sure that that they don't become part of a narrative. It may not be sexual abuse, but it could be other abuse. That your children don't become part of a sick narrative where their only recourse is to sue or to appear before Congress. That experience alone is psychologically damaging. That you now have to tell something that was awful that happened to you, you have to share it with the world. And I want to pick up on what Robert Papillo said about Simone Biles being vilified and treated as if she was weak and not American, all those other things, because she dared to say, no, I'm not going to compete in this particular event. For my mental well-being, I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. And I'm going to withdraw. And people criticizing her for that after all that she's been through and continues to go through. And by the way, she did, even through all that, win a medal. And what all these gymnasts and athletes go through, we have to sit back and recognize that they are part of religion.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go back to religion, whether people like it or not, because it is only in these circumstances that people who would be diametrically opposed to each other, politically, morally, and every way, can sit side by side and cheer on the people who cannot stand black people, don't want to see black people, hate black people for whatever reason, and would be involved in hate crimes, will sit and cheer on black athletes and sit next to their black parents and have civil conversation over how well they're performing on the field. So we need to think about those things too.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of hypocrisy that's involved in that. But as parents, let's put that aside. As parents, we have to take some responsibility for what's happening and be very engaged in what's happening with our children.
That's
I
right.
know one thing. When they see you there every time, all the time, asking questions and right there with your children, there's a lesser likelihood that child is going to be a victim.
Trust and believe.
Somebody cares, and somebody cares who has a voice, and somebody
That's right.
cares who's going to make you think, and somebody cares
That's
who's
right.
not going to let it happen on their watch.
They behave very differently when you are present. Let me go to Henry from Glen Ellen. I want to at least get one call in. Henry, what's on your mind? You have something to say about the FBI?
Yeah, this is still J. Edgar Hoover's FBI, quintessentially racist, white supremacist, so-called law enforcement organization. I'm still convinced, at least I it would not surprise me if Hoover actually ordered the assassination of Dr. King.
Yes.
And, I don't think James Earl Ray had anything to do with it. But the FBI is beyond reform. Christopher Wray is going to lift a finger to really truly reform the FBI, and neither is Biden. He's looked at the FBI the way it is all his entire political career. So it's time to replace the FBI. They dropped the ball on 9/11, the Boston Marathon bombing, and they've done it over and over again. So that's really my comment.
No, you know what? High five to you, my friend. Because you are on top of all of this. Because, it's making me wonder, Robert, what is really going on around here? You all don't protect these children? And are you kidding me? No, I see something nefarious and sinister at play here, and it is troubling to me. And now I'm so glad that all of this abuse, this sexual abuse in these elite programs, I'm glad it's coming out. Robert Patillo, I've got about a minute and a half for you.
Well, part of this is the democratization of information because, 20, 30 years ago, this would all just be urban legends. It would be whispers in back rooms that people didn't take seriously. But because now, with the internet, with the way that people are able to communicate, it for some reason still takes not one woman coming forward, not two women, but hundreds of women coming forward to get these monsters off the street. And I think we need to break down those barriers to communication that prevent people from doing this earlier. Imagine if the first girl to be abused simply was able to come forth, tell the proper authorities, and they put this dude under the jail where he belongs at. But because of the way that we've structured our society, because of the fact that we do not believe women, that we do not listen to women, we also still have the culture where we tell children to be seen and not heard. Shut up, sit in the corner, the adults are talking. We have to start looking at the way that we structure these things and how we communicate, because we have to stop this from happening going forward, because no amount of money is going to give somebody back their innocence. No amount of money or civil settlements or prison time for this guy is going to give someone back their ability to trust. To be able to have relationships with individuals in the future and not think that the people you trust the most will hurt you or betray you. So it's crucial that we learn how to respect people, understand when people are complaining that they are not complaining, but they are providing proper information, and that we action earlier, not 20 years later, and nip these things in the bud before they metastasize, as we've seen with R. Kelly, as we've seen with Nassar, as we've seen with other big cases where it takes 20, 30, 50, 100 people to come forth before we actually take action.
Both Shem Beckler, Jerry Sandusky, Joe Paterno. I see a pattern here, and it's disturbing. I hope you all see it too. In these elite situations where you have poor and middle and working class children who get their shot,
30.
There's something that's not right here, and we need to pay attention. Don't offer your children up, whatever their gifts are. You stay on top of them. That's what I'm going to say. And don't trust anyone that much. I thank God I had a mama who trusted no one. Stay right there, like CK. She trusts nobody. This woman's in Kansas or someplace every weekend. That's why she has the sniffles today. She's out there taking care of her baby, and that's what you have to do. Got to do it. Let's talk about this budget on the Santita Jackson Show. Yeah, you do have skin in that game, too. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show. Sending you much love. Thank you, Abraham. You're so sweet down there in Venezuela. I love you. And Carol, I hope that you are having a blessed Yom Kippur. My sister, she sent me the loveliest Christmas card. I love you, Carol, my sweetie. And they're working in my buildings. This is what happens. I can't believe this. I'm so glad I'm not asleep, but I'm on the air. Like what? Whew. CK and Robert Patillo, I'm going to let you all go, okay? Or do you want to stay and listen to, and participate in the discussion on the budget?
I will. I can listen. I do have a 8:45.
Okay.
That I need to, but I would love to. I'd love to hear, and because the budget is something that is great. I think we have some issues there too.
Are you going to be on Court TV today?
Dr. Wolf is with us.
I'm going to be on Court TV tomorrow.
Okay, make sure give us that. So you be on. Let's come on in the morning, but we need to definitely talk about that. Kelly.
I'll be available tomorrow.
Okay. I'll be tomorrow. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Okay, sweetie.
I'll find out today, because what they do is they cover all the live cases, and a lot of these are criminal cases.
Mm-hmm.
But R. Kelly, of course, that case is very. I watch that very carefully because it's just tragic, and I think in listening to what's happening on the testimony on the Hill yesterday, and what these gymnasts have gone through, and so many other young girls and young women have gone through, and there are men who have gone through similar things. And
oh yeah,
case, there were some young men that came forward as well, alleged victims. So,
well, you see the wrestling case in Ohio, right? Where we have the involvement of one of our congressmen. I mean, this is systemic. But let me say hello to Dr. Wolf. Dr. Wolf?
Hello.
It's wonderful hearing your voice. I'm talking to Attorney C.K. Hoffler. We were talking about the Nassar case at Michigan State with our gymnasts.
Yeah. Yes, it's a tough contextual intro. I feel like if I had a publicist, they wouldn't like the association. Yes.
hi, Dr. Wolf. How are you?
Girl, don't pay any attention to him.
For your insights this morning.
Oh, it's a lot. And happy Yom Kippur.
Yes, the joyous Day of Atonement.
That's right.
One of the many light, airy holidays of the Jewish people. Those were no doubt inspired the throngs of 5 followers that the religion now has.
No, that's not true. But, it's something I think, I think it's something that we do need. There's nothing,
It is true.
Yeah.
It's intellectually and philosophically valuable, and probably the world could do with thinking about what it would like to do differently and better going forward, and spending some time in fasting and reflection.
Absolutely.
Fasting is kind of doesn't get as much credit as it deserves. I mean, so now they understand it's useful for your health, but more importantly, it was an interesting collective solution 6,000 years ago to end human sacrifice. I think it's timely, the idea that everyone gives a little of themselves, so no one gives all of themselves.
Well, you know,
one way we could benefit from thinking about the COVID challenge.
But that's why it's important for us to learn from everyone's path to God, because each of us has something to learn from the other. We all do. To put aside just one day out of your life, just one day in a year, to have a good think.
30.
Where your focus is on the one who created you and all that is around you. I think that is very important. I really, really do. And it's something that I embrace.
It's liberating.
Yes, and you need to atone for the stuff that you've done. Don't go back out and do it again. But But we've had a morning.
Collectively as well as individually too, which people don't always remember. That atonement and doing better.
Hold on, because I'd like you to say something about that, if you don't mind.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, Thursday, September 16th, 2021. If you want to hear the podcast of this show, go to WCPT820.com. Call me 763-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. And of course, GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. I want to hear your voices today. It's been wonderful hearing from you all today, from Jim and Henry and everyone else. 773-763-9278. In the midst of all of the things that we have had going on, the recall, all of these different trials, listening to the gymnast testify yesterday, we still have the business of state, the business of government. Well, all of that is at hand, and we all have skin in the game. Before we get out of here, I certainly want to wish, before we get on to that, I certainly want to wish you, my brother beloved, my dear, dear friend, someone who I love so, so very much, you and your family. Dr. Max Wolf, you and your family, I wish you the best, the most blessed Yom Kippur today. Before we get out of here, I want to get some of your thoughts on that, because I think it's so important to hear. If you'd like to share them now, you certainly can.
Sure. So I should definitely preface this by saying I don't have particular expertise or depth of knowledge here. So there's probably any number of voices that could be as good or better. But that notwithstanding, I guess I'm the guy here to make the answer. So I think the idea is that there's a reflection period that starts at the new year. So September, this period is kind of the high holy days. You start the new year, that's Rosh Hashanah, and then you'd spend 10 days in introspection, reflection, and atonement so that you're possibly to be deemed as worthy in the year ahead, in the new year. New year, new start, so you start by atoning and reflecting on your sins and transgressions and areas for improvement. I think one thing that's kind of cool about it, which people don't always get, because maybe the Protestant tradition is a little bit more individually focused as opposed to group focused, is that it's not just for individuals to reflect on what they could do better, their sins, and atone. It can be for a group, right? So there can be a group sense of responsibility, and you promise to do better, to be better, beginning with a period of introspection, which actually is 10 days. This is the last day of it. And then there's a sort of an atonement. And then the idea is there's a sort of spiritual cleanse to be worthy of the affection of God in the year ahead. And that could be, again, for an individual or a group. And I think it's conceived originally in the religion, not so individually, more for individuals as well as groups.
I think it's something that we all need. I think we all need a moment of reflection, a moment of atonement, really. Just we need to really understand who we are and
cleanse the body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we need that.
Right?
And
There's
so,
modern science to support that.
well, you know, science, and you know what?
Science is pretty good.
It's science, but it's spiritual. You feel better when you have really faced yourself and you decide to do better. I think you do. I think you do. We can all benefit from that. So, all of our love to our Jewish brothers and sisters
Not
and
without
sons.
sin or transgression, so it's hard for me to understand, but I'll take your word for it.
You are such a mess. I'm you. And please give that to Thea, bless her heart. 'Cause I know she'll get it, that baby. My baby will get it. Her father, I'm still praying on him.
Obviously, I'm kidding.
I, I know. I know. But so let's talk about this budget. I mean, do we have skin in the game? You know, it seems that we need to get really riled up, Dr. Wolf. Dr. Max Wolf, brilliant economist. Of course, he's on every Thursday at this time. And we're talking about economics, but we really talk about some of everything through an economic lens. And I want to know about this budget. Why, with all that we need, what is the holdup? Well, first of all, it seems to me that a budget does reflect what your priorities are, or what they ought to be, what they are. What is in this budget, and what do you think? What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, so I'd start with your point. I think it's probably the most salient one about a budget is really always a statement of priorities, right? It is for an individual and a household. And we all kind of know that, but it also is for a government, right? And so many of my relatives are not American, and one of them once used something interesting, which was not said with derision, but affection for the best, which is America loves to talk about its values, but really values are expressed in dollars in the U.S. more than many places, perhaps. And I think while that has a tone that could seem harsh, I don't think it was intended that way, and I think it's quite accurate. And so one thing that this budget really does is it does show a shift in priorities, and not simply from the Trump administration. Obviously that too, but that's kind of an outlying observation in many ways. It does show a break from the traditional priorities as expressed really since the 1970s. So it is a return to the belief that the government's macroeconomic role should be to sort of lift up the bottom more than anything else. It does have tax increases for profitable businesses. It does have tax increases for household income flows in excess of $500,000. So it does try to place the burden solely on higher income earners, whether those be corporate higher income earners, because most small businesses don't make $5 million in a year per annum, or high income households. Like I'm sure most folks don't need me to tell them that the percentage of American households that reliably take in $500,000 a year or more is quite small. Even in successful circles, it's quite small. So it does try to place the burden, not mostly, but really solely on higher income earners, corporate and individual. And it makes some commitments that are probably long overdue, but pretty interesting and really meaningful, I think. So universal pre-K, getting families childcare and getting kids into nutrition and education programs at 3 years old instead of 5. That may seem trivial to people, but it's actually pretty huge, I think. It's a big deal. It would be a really big increase in equality of opportunity also. Because if you show up 2 years later with less education and less nutrition into a very competitive struggle, you're substantially disadvantaged in first grade. And we know that. There's a bazillion studies across every kind of grouping to show how valuable that is, right? And, I probably don't need to tell you because Rainbow Push cut some of its early impressions around Operation Breadbasket. If I got the name wrong, please don't be shy. But the idea was that communities in need could be lifted up more than people might have guessed by just making sure that kids had a safe, friendly, caring place to be in a full stomach, which is a simple observation, but was time we relearned it. And so that's in the budget. I think that's obviously none of this is passed yet. So the final version is the one that matters, and we don't know what that will be quite yet. But that I think is pretty important. So I'll hats off to that. At least that's in there. We also see family leave, and we're going to see an expanded ability of people to take care of a sick loved one, a child, a parent, a spouse, etc., and not be disadvantaged or terminated from their job. I think that's really big. To me, that's the ultimate in family values, right?
So I think that's pretty big. That's in there. I think there's an expansion in access to Medicare and Medicaid, which will help a lot of people get health care. I think the COVID pandemic might have really highlighted for a lot of people, coinciding as it did with 20 million job losses, that tying your ability to see a doctor, particularly in these difficult health times, exclusively to your employment, is probably a pretty good reason that no one else in the developed world does that. And we probably should temper that here. So I think that's pretty meaningful. And then I think one of the more controversial parts of the bill, to me, is really big and is a real lesson of COVID, which is closing, at least as much as we can, that digital divide. Mm-hmm. Because if you didn't have access to digital tools in the last 20 months, you couldn't work from home, which meant you couldn't work, or work was life-threatening when it didn't have to be. And it would be hard for you to shop. And in those joyous days of being unable to find paper towel and toilet paper, you would be disadvantaged, or masks or hand sanitizer. And obviously, those are potentially quite impactful. So I do think there's a bit of an outreach there.
Well, I'm trying to find out what the holdup is. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, the flip side, there was a lot of, I think, progressive groups that wanted to see more of a wealth tax or inheritance tax.
Would that work?
Proposal.
Would that work?
No, it did not work. It's not in the proposal.
The appetite for that with the people, but pushback from the wealthy in Congress. I mean, what do you think?
I've said this before. I don't mean to accuse anyone of anything beyond what they deserve, but if you auction off seats in Congress to the highest bidder, then there is a possibility that the highest bidder doesn't like a punish the highest bidder tax policy. Mm. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure that's shocking insight on my part, but yeah, look, does it work? Depends on what you mean by work. It generates revenue, potentially, depending on how much you charge. It generates revenue, and it takes that revenue from more affluent people. To me, the part that America agrees on, which is probably the first order of operation, is increasing the equality of opportunity. And it's hard to argue that two identical young people, boys, girls, what have you, are equal if one of them inherits $50 million and one of them inherits $50 and a collection of ancient pennies.
You know,
strikes me as possibly problematic to the meritocracy.
Just a little. You know, I'm trying to find out what the holdup is and what the pushback. And I guess I saw it in a comment from Ted Cruz from Texas. You know, over the Labor Day weekend, 9 million Americans, well, they had the rug pulled out from underneath them because the enhanced pandemic benefits, federal employment benefits, withdrawn. So there's that. And it is estimated, Max, that some 35 million Americans, that's almost 1 in 10, living in households that have been impacted by these cuts. And Ted Cruz's response was a tweet, get a job? What is that?
You should have spoke from personal experience. Make sure your wife has a really good job.
Ooh. His wife is at Goldman Sachs? Is that who it?
I have nothing against her. I'm not going to join.
I'm not mad. I'm just saying that is so cruel. It's just cruel, I think.
I mean, look, we have a bunch of issues in the labor market here. There's no denying that. We have a lot of unfilled posts, and we've seen that in the labor market there was a hope that employers that people would return to the same jobs and conditions that they were terminated in many cases from. Most of these people didn't quit, right? They were either shut down by governments and therefore forced home, which is not per se their choice, or laid off by employers, which is, again, not their choice, but that they would have the same relationship. And it strikes me as a little bit like the person who dumps you in a relationship and then assumes you're going to come back and pick it right up where it was left off when they flame out with the new one, right? In my experience, that doesn't always go so well, and it looks like it didn't always go that well this time, right? So I think there's an effort afoot now in some quarters to sort of force people back to work, because they love freedom. And that doesn't always work.
and I think we're seeing some tensions there. That is a real issue for the economy, so I don't want to dismiss it. Making sure that people are willing and able to take the jobs that we need to get done is essential, both to those people and to their career trajectories and their income, to the health of the state and, federal, state, and local governments who might pick up burdens there, and also to the employers who need that labor in order to make the goods and services that they produce for the macroeconomy. So this is not a trivial issue. I don't know that things like that do anything other than excite some of your donors, but I assume that if you're in a constant fundraising mode where sound bites get you on TV and bromides get you donations, then sound bites and bromides are your actual job. And I think if we don't want that from our politicians, we'd have to take a look at a system that forces the politicians to do that or votes them out of office.
We're talking with Dr. Max Wolf. Well, I mean, it is sad, but I want to know, because people are saying that, they're being asked to call. We're talking with Dr. Max Wolf, economist, about the budget. We have yet to get that passed. I want people to know what is in the budget for them. It's important for us to understand what's in it for us, because people, we operate out of our own self-interest, right? No matter how altruistic we are. I think it would be helpful if we know, as you just said, the internet, having access to it. Every man, woman, and child, every human being should have access. What is in this budget? Because everyone is saying that this is like his LBJ moment, right?
Well, it's the most aggressive attempted expansion. And again, we don't know what the final budget is yet, right? But it's the most aggressive attempted expansion of sort of socially inclusive and inequality reduction we've seen probably since Carter, at least. Right. So, in the last 4 decades, which is the relevant point of reference for most folks. It's my whole life, so to me it seems like a long time. If you're older, then yeah, I guess it would seem like less long, perhaps, but it's meaningful. It's quite meaningful, right? Mm-hmm. There's also a tendency, I think, for people to want everything and get focused on what's missing, and there's some things missing here, but this is a pretty bold effort, and I think, to me, if you support this trajectory, this general direction, as well as some of the individual specific programs, you've got to get out there and fight for it. Mm-hmm. You can't just be the spectator on the sideline while your team loses here. That's not this game, right? You'd have to be out there kind of doing your thing, whether that's social media stuff or talking to people stuff or Congress people in your district stuff, particularly obviously if you're in Arizona or West Virginia, where cinema and Manchin are kind of the focus of the effort from the administration and from the president himself and from the vice president herself, try to get them on board, right? Because the cinema vote in Arizona and the Manchin vote in West Virginia are seen as this can't pass without those, and there's some indication, particularly from Manchin, that there are some major components of the bill as it presently is articulated with which he's not comfortable. And given how closely divided the Senate is, they actually need those votes and even potentially some tiebreaker from Harris, Vice President Harris, to be able to carry the day. So it's going to be a nail biter.
What ideally, when you look at where this country is and where it really, really needs to go, what should the budget actually look like? Because of course, President Biden has the concerns of politics. We have, our dreams, we have our ideals, but we also have the reals of life, right? What should this budget look like to get us from where we are to where we really need to be so we can be globally competitive? And and prosperous and healthy and all of that. COVID has shown that we are not as healthy as we need to be. We're not as wealthy as we need to be. It's just, that's what the past years have shown us. That's one of the things, anyway.
Yeah, so I think this is my personal opinion only here, that this is a little bit New Dealish in a different way than the media discussion suggests.
I think if we pass some version of this budget, and obviously we won't pass it as is, we never do, just for the record, it'll be looked back on as a New Deal-ish in a different way than people think, which is this will be saving the system because things have gotten to the point, inequality-wise, suffering-wise, lack of inclusion-wise, where I think it's begun to threaten the continued healthy existence of the economy and the polity. Right? We're going to watch a stress test of that on Saturday with folks who are coming out to commemorate with a failed attempt at a violent overthrow of the U.S. government. That's pretty serious. Now, perhaps it didn't come as close as some, or perhaps some people aren't afraid of that. Mm-hmm. I don't know why, but they're not. Right? But we have fissures, cracks, and gaps in the cohesion here that may have been scary but ignorable 20 years ago, and that are beginning to yawn into the kind of canyons that swallow up democracy. So I think we need reinvestment in a collective prosperity and a sense that people who play by the rules can get ahead. I don't think you can keep going if people think that playing by the rules is a sucker thing that the lower class does, because they don't get it. And so I think having a bigger enforcement budget for the regulatory agencies, the IRS, the SEC, things like that, is important to restore faith in the system.
Well,
having more equality of opportunity is the only way to re-legitimize expertise. I think part of what we've seen with COVID is we have a crisis of legitimacy in our experts and our institutions, and that's also really dangerous.
Well, what can help us? Well, I mean, and you're absolutely right. But collectivism is something that you brought up. I mean, what can help? What can move us in the direction of seeing prosperity as a collective enterprise?
I think people have to conceive of themselves less atomistically, right? And I hate to use the flowery language, and let me apologize while still doing it, of course, which is people have this idea that their future, their fate is independent from the fates of the folks around them. And there is a pretty hardcore lesson in the folly of that opinion called COVID-19. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So, the guy's cough across the room, his ability or willingness to wear a mask or wash his hands is life and death for you and your family. Right? I mean, that's a pretty strident, natural world repeat of the notion of interdependence. Right? So I think if we could lessen our commitment to the delusion of being islands into ourselves, we'd be happier in our households and our relationships, for one, but we'd also be more functional as a we. Right? So I think we exalt we. We love team sports. We like our military. We like the idea of the collective. We admire people who sublimate their immediate desires and needs to groups in a church, in the police force, in the fire department, in the military, right? In history. We just need to figure out that that's how our economy works, because an economy is actually just a system of material interdependence. That's really all it is. The U.S. economy is a series of interdependencies between buyers, sellers, savers, spenders, people who can work and people who can't, people who are young and learning and people who are old and retired and people who are at work every day. It is a vast system of interdependence. It's not a zero-sum game. And if you take out more than you put in, you've wounded the whole. True if you're rich, true if you're poor. Right? I think we probably need less sense of entitlement and more sense of belonging, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, because entitlement and belonging come from two different spaces, right? I mean, entitlement means I own and you get a little bit of what I give you or yield to you. Sense of belonging means that we all are in this together. Now, we're not going to have equal outcomes, but there should be a base beneath which we should not fall. The sky should be the limit, but you shouldn't take up all the oxygen either.
If we're a
right?
we, right? Look, if we're a functioning we, like a functioning team, you don't get past the ball with 1 minute left because you want it with 1 minute left, because presumably all 5 guys on the court want it, right? But hopefully they want to win more. And so whoever's most likely to sink that shot should get that ball, right? And I think we kind of understand that. And when our team doesn't seem to do that, a lot of us are upset, right?
but that's not really that different from a competitive global economy. Right? And if everybody doesn't get shorts and shoes, then we have no idea who should get that ball with 1 minute on the clock. Right? Only in the economics game, it's a little bit different, right? Because if you miss the shot, you don't get to the playoffs. That's a bummer. But if you miss the shot and you don't get to the playoffs in life, maybe you don't get healthcare, food, education, science, investment, growth, medicine, right? Like, and I'm not trying to trivialize outcomes in sports contests. They're important stuff, but, this might be another order of magnitude.
You're closing.
I won't repeat it because it didn't go well for me in terms of some reactions. But, I once likened losing a war to, what would happen if one of the sports contests and the teams you cared about a lot lost, and as a result of that loss, there was a rash of sexual assault, violence, and looting. Yeah, it would jack the stakes up in the game. People would start to act crazy. Last thing, I think, we all sort of think people are acting extra crazy now, whatever that means.
1 minute.
Sensitive to mental health challenges in any way. But I think there's another social lesson there, too, worth learning, which is people will do crazy things if you put them in impossible situations. You can set your watch to that.
Absolutely.
That's just the way the human species responds to an impossible situation.
Amen to that. That is it, everybody. We all have skin in the game with all that is going on. Make sure you call 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. That's the House. That's Congress. Both houses. That's call.
It's our skin.
It's our skin in this game. And so that we don't get skinned, call and have them pass these budgets and come up with some more money. If you can come up with trillions for Afghanistan, really, for the military industrial complex, you can come up with something for the American people. We need it. We deserve it. We've got to move forward, everybody. Dr. Max Wolf, sending you much love. Happy Yom Kippur to you and to all of our brothers and sisters of the Jewish faith and tradition and our children. We love you all. God bless you, everybody. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. You know I had to do that. I know you. I said I know he's going to get me for this. I don't care.
No, it's actually an interesting tradition. I think it's more different, even though it's the same of the same tree from Christianity. It's more different in terms of the focus on the individual versus the group than I think people always get.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess it's we're still on Facebook Live. My father would talk with us about this, and I think because he is a seminarian.
He knew it better than me too.
Well, you know what? He
I mean, it's his field. It's not my field. Yeah.
Well, he takes all of these things. Well, you're right. He studied them, and he takes all of this very, very seriously because he has always believed he's really an ecumenicalist. He believes that you need to study different religions, whatever your religious commitment is, whatever your spiritual commitment is. He's always said, you need to learn from different traditions. You need to understand why observant Jews feel that God is so holy you dare not call his name. He's too holy. God is too holy for you to even touch. You don't mention the name. Now, that's not my tradition, but to have that sense of awe, I respect that, appreciate that, and agree with it. That having been said, I think that it's important for us to really understand these different conversations that go on because they can help us to grow. They can help us.
There might be different ways of trying to understand the same basic phenomenon. Like maybe the same God, it's a different path.
It's all the same God. It's just, you're just looking at this differently. Okay. And let me just try and see it. Look, that's why you don't marry yourself. Okay. you need to get another perspective in life. We're not amoeba who split. You need to give up part of yourself to create something even better than yourself. That's just the way it is. Whether it's your child, a new idea, any kind of enterprise, that's what we have to do. We have to grow up.
I subscribe to that old-fashioned notion that you're not a fully formed human if you haven't given part of yourself over to something bigger.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
kind of one of the nicer things about being human on a good day, or the worst thing about it on a bad day. The roll of the dice.
Well, my mother said, if you have not loved someone else, if you have not sacrificed for someone else, what are you doing? Said, that's an awful existence. And there's nothing greater than you in your life. Nothing. That's crazy. Nothing for which you would give your life. Nothing that inspires you, that lifts you up, that moves you forward. No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that.
It's a small life.
It's a small life.
I think that this budget, the fight in this budget too about what are basic services is bigger than people think too. Just to get back to that, like, is access to healthcare, is access to the internet kind of table stakes? Should we see those things the way we see access to water or food or electricity? I think we kind of have, but just been refusing to admit it or help people for like 20 or 30 years, basically anyway. But I think it's kind of, this is a real crossroads moment on a bunch of that stuff. Right?
But where do you think we're going to land on this? We're still on Facebook Live.
I think the majority of citizen opinion is definitely on the yes side.
Okay.
Right? But I don't know where we're going to land. That's a slightly different feature.
Yeah.
What makes me a little bit nervous is a lot of people in America, as far as I can tell, have given up because it's so hard and systems can be rigged against them. Right? It's not all imaginary there. They've kind of given up on getting ahead for themselves and their kids, which was the social glue that bound America historically, that you could do better for yourself, and if not for yourself, maybe for yours, your family, your children, or what have you. And it's also really tempting and easy for people to start investing in other people's misery if they can't get what they want. And I think that Ted Cruz, not to pick on Ted, although, I mean, why not on some level? That's an investment in that, right? Which is like, you should be forced to go get a job. It's like, you already are. We have terrible social benefits and lots of holes in them. And if you weren't convinced of that, Ted, you live in Texas. Right? And if I lived in Texas last week, I guess I'd be worried that the Taliban didn't just take over in Afghanistan. They seem to have taken over the reproductive policy in Texas. But like, aside from the fact that Mullah Omar is the women's health minister of the state of Texas, which should have showed up on his radar too, I think that, we should make sure people have jobs because we need those jobs done. Yeah. People need that income and they need that sense of purpose. So those things are both really important, but like, I'm going to starve you out, it seems like a not particularly wise. And also ask yourself what it means about the democracy. Because the beneficiaries of starving low-income people back to work are few. And the victims of being starved back to work are many. So what does that mean Ted thinks? What is his calculation about the state of democracy in Texas? Especially in a week in which Texas poised to pass voting access restrictions. Like, people probably should knit those things together because it looks to me like a person who doesn't have a great self-editing, which there's some indication has haunted the senator before, kind of revealing a bunch of things that his harshest critics would normally have the courage to say.
Well, I think that you're right. And I think that we have got to, you've often said this, we have to grow up in our politics. And we have to go from I and me to we, because we all need each other. And like you said, with all of these job openings, the jobs need to get done, but we have to pay people, not just a living wage, but a wage. They've got to be able to live. You can't afford an apartment in the city in which you work now if you do not have a white collar, high six-figure income job. I mean, that is just ridiculous. And it's socially unsustainable.
Yeah, and even with a good, above-average, white-collar college or master's degree job, our premier cities are also unaffordable. You're really strapping in New York or Boston or Brooklyn or San Francisco or LA or Chicago. And if I forgot your city, sorry, I'm sure it's true there too.
Absolutely.
I don't know every geography, but a lot of American cities, you could make $100,000 a year and you're barely hanging on, right? $100,000 pre-tax dollars a year, you're kind of hanging on by the spit, dreams, and duct tape. So if you're making 40, yeah, I mean, you're really on the edge. You're going to have like a material deterioration in your physical and mental health from the strain of surviving on that income. We kind of know that. Well, I'm not saying people are sick or crazy because they make no money, right? You know what I'm saying. I'm saying that you are being asked to do 4 weeks worth of spending on 3 weeks worth of income every single month.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes all kinds of tolls on people. Some of them take sort of a while to show up, but they're there. Those strains are there, right?
Absolutely.
It's like a funny phrase. It's not in English, but like they're called stretch marks on the money. Like it'll show up in physical form as well as other forms, the amount of strain that entails.
Absolutely. I mean, this is...
Yeah, not because you're doing crazy luxury stuff, because you're trying to survive.
Pretty much. I'm concerned that, you know what, I think that we're getting to a place where we're beginning to see that it's not just the me, it's the we. And I think that's part of the gift of a pandemic, if you will. Because, look, this is an airborne illness, and we're all breathing the same air, kids. And at some point, we are all touching each other. We are all virally, if you will, connected to each other, if not spiritually.
I don't want to miss the heroism here. I think the media hasn't always done a great job with that, right? I know they have a lot to do, and everyone loves to criticize them. But the truth is there's a lot of people who have gone out at cost to themselves, possibly great cost to themselves, and they've done all the right things, right? They were scared of the shots, but they got them. They hate wearing a mask, but they wear it. They couldn't afford it. It was hard to get, but they got the hand sanitizer. And they stayed home when they wanted to go out. They watched the world from the window. And they made sure an elderly friend or parent or neighbor was okay. And they tried to teach their kids from home while working from home with someone else working from home. And they kept it together despite the strain on the family and the relationship in their life. And they were afraid that they'd get sick, and they're afraid that they'll die, and that's not even over. They're afraid they'll get in a car accident, go to an ICU that turns them away. Right? That's a lot to put on people. And yet every day, millions and millions and millions of people get up and do all the right things when there's no guaranteed pot at the end of the rainbow, and there's so many temptations to do wrong.
Oh, boy.
And as much as we should call out the people who do the wrong thing, we can't forget the legion of people who do the right thing. And whatever we still have left, it's on their shoulders that the burden was carried. And that's pretty amazing too, right?
Yeah.
People who wear a mask even when they're outside because they're afraid of an elderly parent's frailties or a loved one with a medical condition that's serious, and so they can't get a vaccine or they won't, but they still need to be cared for, right? And even all the people who have gotten the vaccine despite their fears and reservations and didn't really want it, but got it to protect someone else. To me, that's as much of the story as the people who won't get it, right? I mean, they're both important. My point isn't to say that there's nothing going wrong out there. For sure it is, but you don't want to forget what's going right too, because a little bit of time spent and effort on what's going right can give you the hope in you, right? And I think not always good at remembering to tell that story here.
Well, I agree with you. I absolutely agree. Absolutely. And I think that we've got to, we need to have more and more of these conversations, because with all the things that are going on around us, Dr. Wolf, we need to look at these things. When we hear the budget, we just hear budget and we move on to, to dessert, or we channel surf. And this budget, more than any in decades, well, all these budgets have you in it, but you could be a direct beneficiary. And I suspect that that's part of the reason you wanted us to talk about it today.
Yeah, even Senator Cruz. Remember when he cut short his trip to Cancun rather heroically to the small hurricane and the COVID outbreak?
Oh, yeah. Oh.
He didn't have to come home a few days early from Cancun. But that's just,
Oh, did you say, wait a minute, he didn't have to come home from Cancun? You are so wrong for that.
Really?
Oh, my gosh. He did not have to come home from Cancun several days early.
But I mean, I think he did cut the vacation short a few days.
Oh.
Probably just because that hurricane and the COVID outbreaks. He didn't have to.
Oh my gosh.
It reminds me a lot of, the frontline workers.
Unbelievable.
And I'm pretty sure he got the vaccine, so he did sign up for that pretty quickly.
He got it first. And if he gets sick, he'll be able to get therapeutics. Hello? Because, as we're fighting for access to vaccines, we also need access to therapeutics. I've been talking about that since the beginning of this.
Access to good guidance, and people need access to good guidance and hand washing stations.
All of it.
Sanitary supplies of all types and PPE of all types. And while that's obviously better, than it was in the worst of sort of the initial surge where things were really dire, there's still trouble there. There's still folks kind of not getting the word on things and not getting help with, with masks and sanitizer and other stuff, right? Which you need whether or not you're vaccinated. So we kind of know everybody needs those. So I think also just the school policies. Look at this welter of confusion in a lot of places. So some places have done a great job, and hats off to them. But as the kids go back to school, there's a little bit of a hold your breath and see what happens with Delta, which isn't the best, right? But there's a lot of lack of clarity about what is and isn't dangerous for the kids, right? What is and isn't the best policy in these schools. And yeah, sure, it's tough times and this is fast breaking and we haven't dealt with this exactly before. But it'd be nice to be further down the road, year and a half plus into this than some jurisdictions look to be as the little ones go back to school the last couple of weeks.
Well, we'll see. But I want us to continue this conversation because I think, in fact, that several people, when I told them that we were going to be talking about this today, they said, "Oh yeah, this is great because I need to know what's in it for me, and people need to know what's in it." And they didn't say it from what's in it for me. It was like, I think I need to understand the budget. Because I think this budget needs more explaining than ones do ordinarily.
Yeah, because if we're going to build back better in a lot of communities, we need to do better for those communities, right? So I think part of what COVID reveals is much different than COVID. So part of what COVID revealed to me, and obviously there's some subjectivity, but what COVID revealed is how fundamentally we've betrayed our basic burden to significant communities in the U.S. Obviously it's not a huge number of people by head count, but the Native American community was badly mistreated.
Oh, absolutely.
And has really serious issues with COVID in a lot of places and really a gross underprovision of services also in a lot of areas, right? And just to call out one example, some geographies have been hit really hard and they've been hit by being under-resourced and then also blocked from protecting their own citizens by various governors who think they're going to be the next Republican presidential candidate. Right, so I don't know why anyone's in the business of banning masks during an outbreak, especially if you've historically preached local autonomy. Right, if local autonomy is good enough for civil rights, why isn't it good enough for the right to choose whether or not to wear a piece of fabric over your face? Seems a bit odd.
Oh.
It seems quite unfortunate.
It is. It is. But it also speaks to a certain smallness that we do have, just in so many other areas.
But to me, if you got a vaccine and you wear a mask, and some of these folks do, at least maybe not always on camera, but every other moment, and you're telling someone else that they're not that they don't have to, but that they may not have a mask mandate, right? You're basically killing people.
But Max, I've had people come to my place who came to deliver, or because I've been very careful about letting people in, even with the work that I need to have done. They're unmasked.
And theirs.
Well, hold on, they're unmasked. And I tell them, "Oh, you need to I need you to wear a mask." And they shrug and they say, "I'm vaccinated." I'm telling you, it happens all the time. They've even changed the definition of vaccination in the dictionary. That happened at the beginning of this year. So people are functioning, and we've talked about this before, with they don't have the information that they need. They don't. They do not have the information that they need.
People don't assimilate facts they don't like, right? So people like the idea that they're not at risk or that this.
Well, no, because until January 2021, a vaccination loosely meant that you had been inoculated from contracting a disease or spreading it. In January of this year, the definition of vaccination was changed in the dictionary. I saw it and I pulled the information on it. And the thing is, bottom line, a lot of people just got vaccinated, if you will, for convenience. A lot of people do not care. They care about not getting sick themselves, not about not infecting other people. Because a lot of people who have been vaccinated, who I am, do not wear these masks. They don't wear them. And they justify not wearing them.
Unvaccinated,
No,
we're very careful too.
yeah, I'm saying that you just have a lot of selfishness all the way around. And I have a lot of bad information. And it's got to stop.
Yeah, I mean it. But my point is also there's lots of lack of uniformity in information, which I think is an invitation to trouble. So if there's 3 or 4 different authorities and they're telling you 3 or 4 different things, a conscientious person who's smart enough and spending the time and effort to monitor what's going on can end up very confused for no fault of their own, right? I mean, even now, this debate about the boosters is confusing to most people, right? Do you need a booster? Do you not need a booster? Or how protected are you without a booster? How long should you go without a booster, right? Mm-hmm. Does it matter which shot you got, how you see boosters? I mean, I think it's pretty unclear because there's different federal and local agencies with pretty mutually exclusive guidance kind of swirling around out there.
Well, you have the two persons from the FDA who resigned last week. They just signed on to a letter with the Lancet, which is one of the most esteemed medical journals in the world. And, they said, we don't need boosters right now. You don't need them. That's what they said. This is what this letter, I'll send you the letter from this letter that they, along with other esteemed scientists, wrote in the Lancet.
Debate here, right? Which I think people don't grasp either. There's whether it's morally defensive to give some people in developed countries with money a third shot, while most of the world waits for a first shot, where the first shot is much more likely to save lives and prevent, for the collective here, to prevent more and more virulent variants, right? Because all these pockets of people who don't get any help and don't get vaccinated and don't have access to the ability to practice the sanitary conditions, the distancing, the masking, the hand washing and sanitizing, et cetera, those are incubators and kind of petri dishes for the next variants, which could have all kinds of lethal attributes, which we can only not even really imagine yet, right? And so the question is, for the collective health, should we give some people shot 3 with whatever benefits it has, and probably some, while others wait for shot 1? And the counterfactual is there much of a connection between some people getting shot 3 and other people waiting for shot 1? And there's a question there about both of them. But we're having a conversation on 2 different axes. One is public health policy, and the other one is an individual calculation about antibodies, right? And I think there's sort of a head-on collision there, and I think the way it's discussed meaningfully, I think there's really good arguments on both sides, doesn't get captured in the public debate that much, right? Because even some societies ask the same question, by the way, that we're asking about boosters or third shots in the Moderna and Pfizer case. Some countries asked and answered differently than we did, by the way, the same questions on the first shots. Like, should we give a lot more people their first shot before getting other people to the second shot? And some countries made decisions to do that differently than we did.
Of course.
The United Kingdom.
But they also need to answer questions. Israel is what, the second or third most vaccinated country in the world? And everybody in there, most people who are in the hospital have been vaccinated. Answer the questions. See, that is the thing. And I'm giving you what I'm getting from people when I speak to them. I know in the Black community, the majority of Black people have not gotten these shots. They have not gotten them. And you're beginning to, but white evangelicals are less likely to get them than anybody. And we're setting up a civil war. This is not a pandemic of the unvaccinated. That is not true. My mama did not get COVID from someone who was unvaccinated. She got it from someone who was vaccinated. Okay? We need to stop this. If you want to stop the pandemic, bang forcing things down folks' throats, dealing with what's really happening with the effectiveness and efficacy of these vaccines and with of the therapeutics. We need to have a full discussion about that. You can't, not you, but one cannot continue, or these entities cannot continue to deplatform people and shame them. It's not working.
Agreed.
It's not working. If you think January 6th and this march on Washington that we're about to have on the 18th,
Yeah.
and call them crazies. These are Americans. These are people here. These are people here.
Well, you can be American and crazy.
You can, but you can also disagree with stated policy and not be crazy. I was talking to one of my girlfriends the other day, and she was explaining to me why she hadn't been vaccinated. And I said, well, yeah, because I was a little surprised. And we're always checking with each other in terms of our health because we have the same surgery, right? So, and our bodies have been rewired in a particular way. So she's been like a guiding light for me. She said, we're both immunocompromised twice because of this, that, and the other. So we have to be very careful. She said, but I found that I don't do vaccines well. Didn't realize it until I became an adult and saw some of the issues that I have related to it, the vaccines that I got as a child. And I was not feeling very well. I was out of town and I went to the doctor, and this doctor, without permission, after she told this doctor that she didn't do vaccines well and she didn't want this vaccine because her husband was in the hospital, and the doctor was saying, well, you need to have this, that, and the other in order to see him. Her husband has since passed on. Do you know that without her permission, she got a jab just before she was about to get off the examining table? She was in the ICU that night. Now, no one is saying that you should not get the hepatitis vaccine, but it almost killed her. Because this doctor, and
responsible medicine.
Of course, but the doctor was a friend. So the doctor felt that they had latitude. And all I'm saying is,
I think we should state, though, that like most of the hospitalization and death is unvaccinated, the vast majority.
No, but no, because they stopped. No, I agree with you. Only because they are not counting the unvaccinated hospitalizations the way that they have in the past. The CDC has already decided to do that. Is really because I think they have been far more honorable and just far more honest in their reporting. In the United States, it's a mess. I have an epidemiologist on my show every day talking about it. It's a mess. And she is not an anti-vaxxer. She's gotten her vaccines. And she won't let people near her home who are not protected because she just became a grandmother about a week and a half ago. So obviously she has a granddaughter and her daughter to protect.
Yeah, infants are always at risk, right? You got to be really
absolutely
careful. Nothing to do with COVID either.
Yeah. So she's got a lot, but she's got concerns. That's why she was applauding the FDA officials who resigned. She said because that's a principal position that they've taken, and we're going to be able to get more information if the media would be honest, if they would stop being salespersons for big pharma. I
don't think the education has been good.
It's been awful.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that, but I do think we have a responsibility to tell people that depending on their condition, and there's pretty rare conditions, but they exist. Depending on their condition, they are almost certainly substantially better off vaccinated. And it is a pandemic of the unvaccinated to the extent that the serious illness and death is highly concentrated in the less than 40% of America that's unvaccinated.
And I'm simply saying that
they're not perfect, and they're not a panacea.
It's not.
Or absolve the social issues very much.
Gotten vaccinated are also getting very, very sick. That's becoming more and more clear. Those numbers that
very sloppy, by the way.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's adding up, and we can't. For us to use the pandemic of the unvaccinated, number one, it's a lie. They need to stop that. All I'm trying to get at, Max, for everything is truth. I majored in chemistry in college for most of my time there. I am really agnostic about anything. Not except God. Put in the variables and let's get to the equal sign. That's all I want to know. That's it. And so when the CDC, when they are not counting all of the unvaccinated, their illnesses, vaccinated illnesses, when they have different metrics by which they measure breakthrough viruses, they need to explain that to people. And they're not doing
But there's
that.
also a certain amount of uncertainty because it is a moving target, because there's a lot that people don't know. So it isn't always, misinformation as just people don't know the truthful information. And I think one of the sad things that COVID has revealed is if you socially require, and the public does demand sometimes, certainty in areas where there isn't certainty, that produces a set of outcomes that are meaningfully not optimal. Right? Because you're insisting on a level of certainty that couldn't possibly be legitimately arrived upon.
Oh,
you know
look,
what I mean? Like,
I hear you.
Sort of ready-made disaster. And again, I'm not trying to blame the victims of these things, but like, you do have a situation where the public is saying, what is the definitive answer to A, B, and C? And you don't know. And it is destabilizing or politically impossible or functionally impossible sometimes for experts to say, hey, we're not sure, but we think this. And that's to do with a sort of scientific illiteracy, which is the big issue here, right? Separate apart from COVID, but highlighted by COVID. But a lot of people don't have a good idea of what's healthy. No fault per se of their own, but they don't really know what's healthy. They don't have a great handle on how the human body works, even though obviously they live in one, or what damages them, or what helps them, or what would be protective, or what would be risky for, and I think that's kind of a social health failing. And, people also don't have access to preventative medicine. So it's not just that people in the United States aren't healthy, there's some truth to that in some cases for sure, but people don't actually know what health they're in because they don't have a regular monitoring or preventative relationship with any kind of healthcare provider.
Well, I think the conversation that you and I are having, our conversation to be able to have this kind of conversation in tone and in substance. All over the country, we're not having that. You don't have people in the mainstream media from the administrators, from the FDA, these officials who resigned. I want to hear why they resigned. I want to hear the pressure that they got from the White House. Because the FDA they are the ultimate source. They are the people who are supposed to approve a product. That's not the White House's job. That's not the World Health Organization's job. That's not what the CDC, none of those entities do that. That's the FDA's job. But the only way I can hear from them is to dig and dig and dig and get a letter that they wrote in a British journal. Are you serious? That's a horrible thing. And it makes me look at them, give them the side eye. So I'm going to give you the final word before we go. But I'm hoping that we will, because now we're seeing that we paid for these vaccines. We paid for them. They're making money hand over fist. The governor of Texas, Max, got he got the virus. He was barely symptomatic, according to his press release or according to his tweet, and he got Regeneron. I don't know too many people who've not been hospitalized who got Regeneron. He was able to get the monoclonal antibodies just to make sure that he really doesn't get sick. That doesn't happen to most people. C.K. Hoffler has the case of a young man, barely a young man, just a boy who had a full scholarship to Morehouse, and he had COVID. His parents said, he's got COVID. They took him to the hospital. They basically sent him home with aspirin, like they do for so many people. They took him back because he got sicker. When they took him to the next hospital, the third time, he died there. I said, CK, don't you dare let them call this a COVID death. He died of neglect. I know so many of those cases, Max. Level playing field and play the game by one set of rules. Everybody ought to be able to get tested. Everybody ought to have equal access to equal high quality health care and therapeutics.
with you. I just think that needs to be framed as a healthcare issue.
It is a healthcare issue.
Yeah,
it is.
I don't think it's a COVID-specific issue. Obviously, there are...
It's not COVID-specific. I'm just thinking of COVID specifically. But it's an issue. Yeah. It's not a COVID issue. Look, I have other issues that ain't got nothing to do with COVID. And that we're still on Facebook Live. Yeah, I mean, I got other issues in my life.
I get it. And look, everything is a COVID issue and nothing is a COVID issue because COVID has just become, whether people like it or not, a long-term part of the fabric of our lives. Through a lot of reasons, the disease itself, mismanagement, the global dynamic, social issues, misinformation, blah, 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 blah. Right? There's a long list of suspects, culprits, and reprehensibles here, and rehashing it's not that useful. I don't know that it's hugely useful. I mean, I know people seem to like to do it, but I'm not sure that it covers a ton of meaningful ground, forward direction. But I do think people need to sort of take the view with their COVID decisions that they're collective decisions. That the decision to get vaccinated was really designed, even though it wasn't always, to prevent the healthcare system from collapsing. And in that area, the vaccines have been highly effective, right? And that's really socially important because if you cut your hand open, you don't want that to be a death sentence because you can't go to the doctor, or if you have a car accident or a heart attack, stroke, whatever the things are that send us very reasonably and very urgently hurtling toward the emergency care infrastructure.
But what they need to do is explain that. Like, they should not explain this as a vaccine so that people think that they're inoculated and they can take it and go on. It needs to be explained as a therapeutic medicine that mitigates death or hospitalization. I understand that.
Pretty effectively, too.
We're not at that point. That's established. But when you don't explain things the right way, then you engender mistrust. And you engender mistrust with a community. This gynecology was built on my foremothers. My foremothers were never given anesthesia. They gave it to white women. They didn't give it to black women. So they would cut us up inside. They do whatever they wanted to do. So they that is in our DNA. That is in my life experience. That is the reason my grandmother wouldn't look at roots, Max. She said, and she was a very light-skinned black woman who was very clear. She had more other blood than black. Okay. And she said, do you think I want to be reminded why I look the way I do? Why we look like this? I didn't look like her. I mean, I look like her, but not like that. She said, oh, no. I mean, there's a lot of pain here. And there is so much insensitivity to that. And to the experiences of poor people, generally speaking, in this society and in this world. And it is my hope that we will have some truthful conversations. And if, just have truthful, get the information out. But I certainly want to hear from these FDA officials who resigned, who are pushing back, who felt so strongly about these boosters and who feel so strongly that we do not need them at this time, that I want to hear from them. And I shouldn't hear from them. I shouldn't hear from them in some journal that most lay people will not read. That's The Lancet. Oh, come on. That's ridiculous.
Prominent medical magazine. But you should invite them on your show as well.
Because I want to know. Look, I want to know. Me, you, Thea. I think of all these people. People need to be safe, and we need to feel safe.
For sure.
But
by way of winding down, because I realize I have at 9:30.
Oh well, I just love you, and I keep you so long. This is what happens with Max and I. Just drive crazy.
I would say one thing that I think is important, taking your OBGYN analogy.
Yeah.
To me, and this may be my ignorance, it would compound the tragedy if historically marginalized and under-considered and often mistreated groups would succumb to conspiracy theories that also prevent them from getting the medical care they need. So even though it might be understandable why there's reticence, it would be a very another insulting irony if those folks who made all those sacrifices to get us to this point were unable to get any of the benefit of their past sacrifice. To me, that would compound as opposed to alleviate the damage.
Absolutely. But the thing is, for us, this has not been conspiracy. These have been plans that have been carried out. Um, the fact that conspiracy theory that's a term that the CIA came up with to pull us off of the Kennedy assassination and asking questions. And I think there's some out here, but we also understand plans, and I think that people need to be mindful of that. I'm not a conspiracist, but I am a little paranoid.
Well, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's proven historical record, by the way. I mean, I don't think.
Yeah, and much of the mischief in this world has been hidden from the historical record because
That tends to be the case. But speaking of hidden mischief, I am now very late. I have to dial in, but thank you for your there's always a risk of being really late to a call.
No. Run.
Talking, so they know.
Look, because I ought to have you come back because you're the reason my brother listens to me on Thursday. How about that?
Well, I mean, sure he laughs at, not with me, but thank him for me anyway.
Thank you. Sending you much love. Bye.
Thank you so much.
I love you, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to try to find them. Oh, I love you, Paula. Thank you. And Paula's been with me since the beginning, girl. Love you, Effie. Love you. I don't you want to hear from them, Effie? I want to hear from them. I really do. I think it's important for them to establish, to tell us why they felt so strongly that they needed to resign from the FDA. That's important. See, when we can have those conversations unedited, then I think see people might not get vaccinated. I don't know, but I think that I think we'll pull the down here, and that's what needs to happen. That's what needs to happen. That's what needs to happen. And you need to stop treating people as if they are stupid and foolish and cannot think. When we first heard about this pandemic, we could not get any medicines. We couldn't even get masks because we were told we didn't need masks, even though we didn't know where this was coming from. But you knew it had to be airborne because that's how you were getting it. Stop treating people like they're foolish, like they don't know something. Like we didn't have to come up with, well, you better take it. You better drink that soup. You better make sure you get your vitamins. We better take care of ourselves because we don't know what this is. For the longest time, we didn't know what it was. Some of us survived. Good sense, good eating, and really taking care of ourselves. And also being locked away so that we would not infect each other. Thank you, Stanley. But that's it. So, stop writing people off. My experience come from people who were enslaved, people who were indigenous, and some immigrant Europeans. And they all have a story to tell. And we need to learn each other's stories and stop writing people off. Even these the white evangelicals who don't want to get shots, who don't want to wear a mask, listen to their stories. A lot of that is based in their religious beliefs, the mark of the beast. Listen to it. You don't have to agree, but listen. Stop writing people off. But I tell you what, your right to be free ends really in my airspace. Please wear a mask. That's all I'm asking. Please wear a mask. Please do that. And then when you go back into your airspace, like which is beyond 6 feet, then do your thing. Let's just do that with each other. And I think that if we respected each other and let each other know that I respect you and I hear you, we would cool these temperatures down. And we need to do that because we are moving into a civil rights stance very quickly, and that will not end well. We still haven't finished litigating the one that ended in 1865. So, Dave, you said you had COVID very early in the pandemic. You were very ill, almost went to the hospital. Oh boy, yeah. I have friends who had at the beginning, like, oh, now I know what I had, and it was the worst thing that I ever experienced. Then I've had some other friends who followed certain health protocols. They really changed their way of eating and vitamins. And COVID that they contracted was not as bad. And I think we need to talk to them too, instead of, we're doing too much bad mouthing of people, and I think it's a bad thing. I really do. It's not helping. I tell you that. So I love you, everybody. And I will, Effie. I'm going to look for these these persons from the FDA, because I think that I think we deserve to hear from them. I think we deserve to hear from them. Why did you feel the need to resign? What do you see? Do we need a COVID booster? I love the president. He's a nice guy, but he's not a doctor. And this is not what he practices. The FDA has the final word, not the World Health Organization, not the White House, not the CDC. The FDA. They are supposed to approve these drugs and practices. And these people felt so strongly about a booster, about not needing it at this time. People need to know. We need to know. So, love everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. Love you.